Panago Pizza presents SDP, the Steve Dangle Podcast, with your hosts, Steve Dangle, Adam Wilde, and Jesse Blake.
Let's go!
Well,
eventful 24 hours, I would say.
a little bit.
But I think first we need to acknowledge the guy in the room, not the elephant in the room.
Jesse
but the
Blake.
guy in the room.
He is newly in the intro,
Yes.
and I'm still not over what an
Yeah.
accomplishment that is.
Thank you.
His
Thank
new
you.
book is called Before the Lights Go Out, A Season Inside a Game on the Brink. His name is Sean Fitzgerald. He works at The Athletic, and he's here. Hey! One of our. He's also, I'm not going to lie, pretty good defensive shitty player. Not going to lie.
Oh my God!
Sorry, was that Shinny with an N?
Shinny with an N. Two
Shinny
N's,
with an N.
actually.
I thought I heard a T in there. Pretty good.
I thought I might have heard.
I thought I heard.
Yeah.
I
Well, you
thought I
never
heard
let
that.
him score though.
Well, no, we went to that race for the puck once, and we were both so out of gas that we couldn't actually touch the puck once it got close to the net. I mean, that hurt. I went for my asthma inhaler after that.
Oh,
There
I took mine
was-
beforehand, so I wouldn't
See,
have to during
that's
the
a
game.
veteran move.
Right?
There was one moment during Shinny the other day where like the puck was in the neutral zone and no one went for it, and I'm like, okay, I think we're done.
Yeah.
Let's get off the
we were
ice.
toast. We were pretty tired. But you know what? A lot of fun playing, and it was nice to have everybody out. Mike Stevens was there from Leafs Nation, and
Lots of folks.
Yeah, lots of good people. It was a great time. Now, we've got, as I said, we've got a heck of a show lined up. Yes, we are going to talk about the Don Cherry. Yes, we are going to talk about the Leafs last night, Crosby, the Flames. I got a question about the Flames. Are they the Leafs West?
I believe it.
Or the Leafs Flames East? If you were to ask someone from the West, they'd be like, hey.
No, the
Don't-
West
don't
has to
compare
take
us.
their cues from the East. That's how it works out.
And Robbie Fabry's looking amazing with the Red
Hi,
Wings.
Sean.
But
Welcome to the
first,
Hi, Sean. Hi, Sean. Steve Dangle podcast. That was Steve Dangle who said that. Hi, Sean.
who wore the crown? So obviously, every week we do this, or every show we do this. Live generously, life will treat you royally. Crown Royal has sponsored this segment because they want to know which Leaf lives the generous life, gives it all for the team. You can use your hashtag #OurTownOurCrown to get your votes in for yours. Steve, I'm going to start you off. Best player on the ice for the Leafs.
Fred Vember, baby. Keeps on trucking. Fred Vember. October Freddy is done. Fred Vember is fully a go. That 3-save sequence in the third was absolutely ridiculous, and he stole a point for the Leafs last night.
Wow.
Fred Vember.
Sean Fitzgerald, what do you think?
I liked in a really slow start. I mean, Freddie Anderson is obviously the answer here. I'm not going to duplicate it. I'm just going to say that before he went down, Mitch Marner had a really good play at the end of a Jake Muzzin stretch pass, and that was like it was so quiet you could hear the electricity in the building kind of thing that night. Like they're down 1-0. Jake Muzzin hits Mitch Marner on a stretch pass going across the blue line. He just misses it, and he's racing full bore for Brian Elliott. Brian Elliott pokes it away at the last minute, sends Marner flying, but it was the kind of hustle play that, I mean, you need that guy to make, and it was something that could have sparked it had he also not potentially obliterated his ankle shortly thereafter.
Man, that was painful to watch. We'll look at that too. A lot of people saying Willie Nylander, and I know somebody else who might, but I'm just going to say firstly, before we get to that, Travis Dermott to me, coming back, like we saw what William Nylander looked like coming back December 1st, not from an injury last year. Travis Dermott is coming back from a 6-month recovery process.
Yeah, with an injury.
Scored last night, but more importantly, has been making clean breakouts and great first passes and all the things that Travis Dermott was doing beforehand. And it's like, I know they're warming him up, and I know they're getting him like, third pair minutes right now. But boy, does he look really good, and I don't know how much longer they're going to be able to hold him down back there.
I thought Kelly Rudy had a really good breakdown last night. Like shaky first few shifts, a couple giveaways, and then he started being a dick. Like Travis Dermott is like low key a real jerk to play against, and then he obviously had the goal, and like it's just Red Bull for blood.
Yeah,
I love him.
No, I don't know if anybody likes scoring more than Travis Dermott.
He should do it more.
He should absolutely
Give it a shot.
Producer Jesse,
Yes.
sir, we need to know
I'm
who you
dying
would
to
crown. Who you crowning?
Well, it was a hard choice, but I think it has to be William Nylander.
Oh,
and not for any
wow.
reason that you guys think.
Oh,
I think we have to give him credit for bailing out Austin Matthews, who once again tried the lacrosse goal, didn't get it, and had to pass it to Willie Nylander.
nope. I'm putting my tinfoil hat on. Matthews did that on purpose.
You think so?
He 100% did
No.
that on
He
He
purpose.
That's
said
like the
after the
fourth
game he
time.
did, and he said he tried to do lacrosse. It didn't work, so he just passed.
You've never told a lie? I think Austin Matthews is lying. He's a dirty liar. He 100% set that play up knowing that it would create space for William Nylander, and Nylander got the easiest goal of his career.
You sound like a conservative pundit right now. You're like, Austin Matthews, liar or failure?
Austin Matthews, he was behind the net trying to do the Michigan lacrosse goal there, and he sent a frog onto William Nylander's stick, and it went in. That's how I saw it.
Was it a gay frog, though?
It was, yes.
If you know,
Thank you, Joe Rogan.
If
Yes,
you
it
don't
was.
know what I'm talking about, it's the Alex Jones, the water's turning the frogs gay moment, okay? That's
Which
the joke.
is not even on the Mount Rushmore of craziest
Shit
things that he has said.
Yeah, no
Yes.
kidding. No kidding. So hey, listen, here's the deal. That's who wore the crown for this
Welcome
week.
to the show, Sean.
All of the Our Town Our Crown went to William Nylander. And the reason for that is that shootout goal that he had.
Yes.
That kept them in.
I hate when a sexy goal gets wasted.
I know.
It was so
sucks.
good.
It
The
sucks.
Giroux one was really good.
It was.
Like, good for him for doing the clapper.
That was interesting because Freddie seemed upset about it. Were you in the
Yeah,
locker
no,
room
I
last
think
night?
I was wondering. I can't remember who the next shooter was, but I was wondering if because I'd been at a game where you do a full clapper from inside the hash, like the next shot on the penalty is their guy doing the exact same thing,
Right.
And I was kind of wondering, like, did they do that? It was in Buffalo a couple of years ago. It was in the Phil Kessel era that we don't talk about that much.
No.
And it led to a brawl. And I was wondering, is the next shot going towards Elliott's head? And it wasn't. But yeah, no, absolutely. That was. One, so audacious, and two, incredible because it did hit that top corner.
It did.
Yeah, it's amazing how close he was. And Freddie was well positioned.
It's like one of those code things that doesn't really come up because you so rarely see it.
Yeah.
It seemed like a poorly timed bunt or something
Yeah,
like that.
baseball's weird because there's
Except-
100 of those little things.
Right.
And people always
Except
try
that
and break
bunt
them.
doesn't take your pitcher's face off.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
if that one hit Anderson's face, we're talking about like, hey, so who are the Leafs going to have as a starter for the rest of the season?
Yeah, it's like if you could intentionally line drive a pitcher in the head.
100%.
Yeah, it was. I understand why he was mad, and I think the next Leaf Flyers game might be interesting.
Well, I mean,
Well, Dmytro Timashov is probably going to throw a hit at some point in the
Whoa.
late first period to early second, and
Man.
we will forget about it by the third, but we'll cheer in that moment.
that's who wore the crown for this week. Brought to you by Crown Royal, as always. Next time the puck drops, why not?
Why not?
Live generously and treat your Reliefs crew to a Crown Royal Old Fashioned. So we had a game last night, and then we had the segment within the game. The segment within the game is the thing that's taken over today, and I'm just going to leave it to the room. Do we want to talk about the game first, or do we want to talk about the segment?
We should probably talk about what was said.
You want to talk
Yeah,
about the
that's the
segment?
most
Canada.
important thing. You get
Okay.
the most important thing first.
So Don Cherry basically, and we're going to, just so you know, I can play it off the board right now, but the levels always suck. So what I'm going to have Jesse do is insert the file later. Can you do that?
Of the audio?
Yeah.
Sure.
Just so
Yeah,
people
that's
can hear
fine.
it and people can see it one more time so you can know what we're talking about. So we'll do that right now.
You know, I was talking to a veteran. I said, I'm not going to run the poppy thing anymore because what's the sense? I live in Mississauga. Nobody wears, very few people wear a poppy. Downtown Toronto, forget it, downtown Toronto. Nobody wears a poppy. And I'm not going to. He says, wait a minute. How about running it for the people that buy them? Now, you go to the small cities, and you know those, the rows on rows, you people love, you that come here, whatever it is, you love our way of life, you love our milk and honey. At least you could pay a couple of bucks for poppies or something like that. These guys pay for your way of life that you enjoy in Canada. These guys paid the biggest price. Anyhow, I'm going to run it again for you great people and good Canadians that bought a poppy. I'm still going to run it anyhow.
Love you for it.
I don't know what it is about the computer on this board, but it
No,
just does
it's always
not.
a nightmare.
It's a bit of a nightmare, and we're still trying to get it fixed. But essentially, you heard what he said there. It's about 40 seconds, and there's a lot of people who don't understand, and I think that we at least ought to go through why.
Oh, I'm sure we'll hear from him.
Sure. Because, I'm a liberal, puke, cuck, whatever you call me today, for not liking this comment.
Puke's old school.
Puke's it's a new one.
It's a very bully from Power Rangers.
Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
anyway.
Punk. You're punk.
Yeah.
Basically, the issue that people have is Don Cherry. It's not that he wants people to wear poppies. I think nobody's going to argue him on that. That's an inarguable stance. They'll be, except for if you're from Ireland, and that's a completely different story.
Yeah,
but
that was one of the most ironic things in last night. I'm like, the only people I ever hear about it are
Irish.
Someone who I'm sure Don Cherry would never criticize.
Right, exactly. Now, the issue was, he said, all you people come here, and you like our milk and honey, I'm paraphrasing, and you like our way of life, these guys laid down the law, you should be buying poppies.
And I think... maybe it went under the radar to some, but I sort of caught it. The no one wears a poppy in downtown Toronto thing.
Mm-hmm.
I thought,
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was very pointed. That
And it's also
downtown
pointed
Toronto.
bullshit.
It's pointed bullshit, but Toronto, most multicultural city in the city, city in the country. I thought it was pretty pointed.
Yeah. And the fact that he specifically said downtown.
Yeah,
it
and you
meant
go
a
to
lot.
these small towns, and I'm like... There's at least 3 dog whistles in there.
Yeah.
One of them was louder than the other, I guess.
So, and Sean, you've been on this story all day for The Athletic, have you not?
Yes.
We allowed to talk about that?
Absolutely.
Okay, and so I guess...
That's not out yet, is it?
The Athletic? No, it's been up for about 3 years now.
No.
It's a subscription site. It's based in San Francisco. We have operations in markets across North America
crazy.
and the UK now.
Got
I hope it works out for you guys.
No, thank you. No, it's just out.
Yeah,
it's good.
no,
It's
okay.
good.
should hire Merle.
Yeah.
I hear it's really cheap to subscribe.
It's
Yeah.
great. It's basically a cup of coffee a month. We can
Right.
talk about that more. You can insert that. We can insert that audio later. It'll be amazing.
But the thing
Full
is
disclosure, by the way, not to keep cutting you off here.
No,
but
no.
I do it all the time.
I live in Toronto, and I went a good long time without a poppy because it fell off.
Yeah.
I think that's what we need to start talking. It falls off. Like
Yeah.
It
I'm
does
wearing
fall
it
off.
now.
Yep.
I'll get up. I'll sneeze. It'll fall off.
Yep.
I mean, I have violent sneezes, but it'll fall off.
I think
Whenever
part of
the-
the reason though they're meant to fall off because the idea is you go back and buy another one. That's what I have heard.
I think that's a tinfoil. That is a worse conspiracy theory than Matthews didn't mean to do the whatever.
Fair enough. Whatever it is,
Yeah.
I agree. I think we had ones when I was on breakfast television that actually had a
Canada pin?
no, not a Canada pin. It's just a black. It was the same black inside, but it was one of those pins that has like a little clasp on the back, and that way it didn't fall
that's
off on
smart.
camera, right?
Yeah.
Because you didn't want it to fall off while you were on the air,
Right.
Because again, if you're on the air without one, people are going to tell you
Oh,
about
it's
it,
bad.
and that's fair. So again, people are not. I don't think anybody would be upset with somebody going, "Hey, I'm not seeing enough poppies this year, and it's hurtful." And that let's remind ourselves why we're here, why we have the freedoms we have. I don't think anyone's going to disagree on that. The issue was you people.
Yeah.
You people that come here. And when we talk about downtown Toronto, or we talk about you people that come here, we know who we're talking about.
Yeah.
We know what that means. If you are from here and or if you are if you're born a Canadian, like born on this soil, and you're not wearing a poppy, he's not talking to you.
Well, and also
Even if you don't have a poppy.
I was saying in the video today, like my grandfather came here, my grandmother came here. He's not talking about them.
No. He's talking about recent immigrants
Yes.
from countries that are not the same
Well,
culturally.
yeah.
That's what it means.
Yeah.
And obviously the reaction today has been huge. And I'm just going to read through a couple statements here, guys, before we really get into this. Sportsnet this morning made a statement, and this is from the head of Sportsnet. This is Bart Yabsley. He said, Don's discriminatory comments are offensive and they do not represent our values and what we stand for as a network. We have spoken with Don about the severity of the issue and we sincerely apologize for these divisive remarks. I'm going to keep going. Hockey Canada released a statement. And this was actually just a few minutes ago. I'm glad you caught this, Steve.
Yeah.
Interestingly, in this, Hockey Canada does not call out Don by name. They say the hockey community does not stand for the comments made last night. Hockey is Canada's game because it brings the country together, be it around the television or at local arenas. Belonging and inclusivity are an integral part of the game. Now, that kind of leads us into, Sean, your book, which touches on this a little bit, among other things.
And some fun stuff.
Yeah.
No, this is great. Yeah,
But-
let's talk about Don Cherry in the book.
Well-
I was hoping there'd be more of a buffer there. No, it's,
Yeah.
the thing. Okay,
We'll
I
go
just-
in and out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's fine. The Don Cherry thing. He said a bunch of stuff before. Hot take, right? Like he's talked about visors. He's talked about fighting. He's talked about
Francophones.
a whole bunch of things. No, yeah, I remember, Alpo, the dog food thing, like the Winnipeg Jets player way back. Go back and Google that. Alpo Suhonen, you call them Alpo, like the dog food. It's like he's got a track record of some really awful stuff. This one hurt people. I talked to people today, like like lifelong hockey fans, like, and I talked to an Oiler fan. I mean, talk to people who've had a rough time watching hockey enough as it is lately. And he's like, I grew up in Windsor, and I never knew walking down the street was today the day I'm going to get jumped again. Is today the day somebody's going to call me a name? Is today the day somebody's going to try and take my turban off? Like, we eventually had to leave Windsor. And now we live in Brampton, and it's a wonderful community, and it's 2019, and I thought we were past all this, and now we're not. Mm-hmm. What Don did yesterday was he othered people. He's on a national platform, and it's, hockey is supposed to be for everybody. Like, hockey and Hockey Night in Canada is what people do historically. It's one of the things that link us together. And he othered the audience. He sat there and he said, there's my Canadians and you Canadians, and they're not the same thing, and they're others. And that's what he did. Whether or not he intended to do it or not, that's what he did. And that's bad. Like, I mean, not to put too harsh a word on it, that's bad. Like, you can't. Mm-hmm. You can't conscionably do that, because it ignores not only the history of all of the people who have come to this country, who come from backgrounds where their grandparents did fight in these wars
under empires that were completely out of their control.
Yeah, and not fighting for their own liberty because they were under colonial rule at the time. Like, bled on foreign soils for the cause that was fighting for this country, and pointed out that Don didn't really serve. Like, he's done a lot of good stuff. He's in terms of veterans and the activism that he's done to maintain their memories, but didn't serve. And what he did by othering them and neglecting their histories was he kind of erased them. It's like, well, there's our Canadians and there's the other ones. Mm-hmm. And that diminished the other ones to a point that I'm still struggling to put into words, honestly. And I think that's what it is. And I don't think it's melodramatic. Like, this one's a big one. Like, this one isn't making fun of guys for not wearing visors or wearing visors, or punching people or not punching people,
well, he used to call
mangling names.
He used to call the French guys sweethearts and stuff like
sure.
that.
Yeah, no, and I'm not diminishing how bad it's been to this point. But the difference is that this isn't something that he's doing that's retrograde on the ice in hockey. This isn't saying we need people to punch people in the face when we know chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Like, this is cutting to the core of, like, what it is to be Canadian somehow. And that's what's really wrong about this. That's what, like, either you need an apology or you can't even apologize. Like,
can you apologize for something like that?
You can, and then it's up to the audience and it's up to Canadians to decide whether or not they want to forgive him or not.
It's funny, we talk about this, and this is a completely different context. But a show like South Park can get away with things because they've established a precedent where other shows cannot go there. Family Guy does this too, where they go there on jokes, and it's like, holy smokes, wow. Now, Don was not joking, and this is a completely different thing, but
and there's no
precedent that Don has
either.
set, the history that has led to this. I mean, to be honest, is anybody in this room surprised? Did anybody not sort of know that this is probably how he felt anyway, based on some tweets that he had earlier this year about murder in Toronto, about crime in Toronto? He was talking about that.
It wasn't just Toronto, by the way. He mentioned Mississauga, where he lives. So he brought up Mississauga as well.
And that's important.
That is important, because Mississauga and Brampton, for those listening who don't live in the GTA, like, Mississauga, Brampton are two of the largest cities in Canada right now, and they are home to a significant, South Asian population. So by saying Mississauga, like, and then othering everybody who's not on Cherry, like, that's an important thing that he just did, and not in a good way.
No. And for a company, and let's look at this from a pragmatic view for a second here. Business. Okay? We know the social impact this had, and Sean, I think you put it in better words than the three of us could have said it.
That's not possible.
No, it is very possible.
I assure you.
But I think what people are confused by, and this is why I brought up the precedent thing, is there are many people who have been calling for this for years because of the multiple things that have piled up on the resume, and people go, well, if none of those things got him fired, how does this one get him fired, or how does this one get him reprimanded? And really, what does a reprimand to the public look like? Was he going to get suspended for a few weeks? Like, from a Rogers Sportsnet perspective, and the NHL as well, because the NHL is making some calls today.
Well, and they had a statement as well.
And I'll read that in a sec. Is business-wise, what's going on behind the scenes right now? Like, are they looking at this as like, okay, the apology I read to you earlier, is that going to be their statement and that's it? You're probably going to hear from Ron on Hometown Hockey tonight. But where does it go from here?
There are a lot of executives in this city who had a very bad Sunday, I would say. Because it's not just, I mean, the CBC put out a statement saying, look, like, this is Rogers owns Hockey Night in Canada. I mean, we sublicense the games, but we don't control the editorial content. But CBC is part of this. Rogers and Sportsnet are part of this. But it's not just them. It's Scotiabank, which is a presenting sponsor and the champion of hockey. And it's also Budweiser, which is a title sponsor for Coach's Corner. Like, there's a lot of very large companies that are now tied into this as their brands are tied and riding on Don Cherry and Coach's Corner, and they're associated with this. So I would imagine that today a lot of calls or texts or whatever it is the kids do these days in the C-suites to communicate with each other, that those were all going around to try and figure out, like, what is the next step. And I think, I mean, there's so many outcomes. Do Don and Ron appear on Hometown Hockey to apologize?
Which we'll know by the time this is posted,
yes.
but not at the time we're recording.
If they don't, then, do they apologize at some point in the next few days?
You have to think Ron
If they
would
don't
anyway.
apologize, is there a suspension? Is there a termination? Like, this isn't the end. That statement was, I think, ambiguous enough that it leaves Sportsnet room to say, upon further reflection, we are.
Why would they want that? Why would they take?
Because I'm going to guess they didn't have a lot of time to put a statement together with
Sure.
the 10,000 phone calls they're getting today from corporate sponsors saying, what on God's green earth is happening here?
And I think if it was easy to get rid of Don Cherry, it would have been done already.
Well, there's no. I mean, listen. Let's call it what it is. They're in a budget crunch right now. They are. People were let go. And
I'm just going to pretend like I'm not here.
Yeah, well, I know, I understand, but like they are, and they would admit that. That's publicly stated information.
Yeah.
And so the fact that if they do get rid of Don, unless you can take them to court, and in a lot of contrasts this exists, unless you can take him to court and say he was fired with cause and that voided his deal, they're probably just going to have to pay out his deal if they want to get rid of him.
I don't even mean from like a business perspective. I just mean like culturally.
Culturally.
I feel like.
Do you think it would be hard though? Because I don't know if it would be that hard anymore.
At this point now, we've reached a point, I feel like, where there would be a groundswell of support to get rid of him. But up until this point, it feels like there would be a group of people who would be very upset if he was taken off the air.
Right.
And I think you saw that when Steve Simmons' story came out in the springtime, that rumor that he wouldn't even come back this year.
Right.
And all the people were fighting back on that. That was just a report.
I had a thought, like, I'm not totally proud of, because, like, this isn't even the only time in recent memory he's generated a fuss or upset people. But I just remember this morning, I saw the reaction last night, and I woke up this morning and I saw the reaction continue. And the thought I'm not totally proud of was, people are, like, really mad this time. You know what I mean? Like, you know why I'm not, like, totally proud of that? Like, I should have seen this coming. I should have understood that, because, like, I think you alluded to earlier, this isn't the worst thing he's ever said on the air.
Well,
it's not
I would
even
leave that to
close.
Sean. Is this the worst? Is this as bad as it's gotten? Because
Are you asking me because I'm the oldest one at the table?
Well, I
here?
think you've got a better memory than the three of
Remember
us.
when CBC came on the air in '05 and no,
Was that a thing?
Well, the reason I ask is because you got a better memory than we do. You've probably done more research on this today than we have.
You've interviewed Don.
Yeah, no. I mean, I don't have them. I think I have done a sort of the encyclopedia before at some point within the last 20 years. I don't have them at the tip of my tongue, but there are things that you don't have to go very far into the archives for. And if you have a Toronto Public Library card, you can go into the Globe and Star archives for free, and they're amazing. To see that, yeah, there's some things that you'll go back through in the 90s, in the late 80s, like not as long ago as you'd think, and you'll have your eyes pop open and say, huh? Like he'd said some things before where you're like, huh?
Right.
But again, like to Steve's point, it's been, well, this is the one that's going to get done. And then it's like, oh, nevertheless.
Right. It's like the Donald Trump tweet.
Right. So
How interesting.
Yeah.
like this one's big because this one cuts outside of sport in a way, if that makes sense. I mean, so much of what he's done, I'm not diminishing anything and the hurt that he's caused by what he said before. I mean, we say, oh, it's just hockey, but like, punching and fighting, like chronic traumatic encephalopathy ruins lives. So I'm not diminishing any of that. But this one cuts so deep into what it means to be Canadian.
Cultural fabric.
And what we are as Canadians, that I think that's one of the reasons that this is continuing, not to echo today. It's building. Like, people are still legitimately angry today, and getting more so, because they're not getting a response directly.
Well, and the apology came out, or the statement, whatever, and people just went, nope.
Because it's not from Don.
Brush that
It's
aside.
not from Don.
Right. It's one, yeah.
It's not from Don. It's not from Ron.
So I read a tweet today, and I want to read it out to you guys because I think it hit at the core of why this bothers so many people. And it was from Roger the Shrubber, just a guy.
Sure.
413 followers, but it took off. He retweeted the Don Cherry video, and he said, the problem with Canada isn't that we're a country of Don Cherries. We're not. It's that we're a country of Ron MacLeans. And now, we've all worked with Ron MacLean before. And I have no problem saying that I don't believe for a second that Ron MacLean is a racist, a xenophobe, I don't believe anything. I do not believe that Ron is anything but the best intentioned human being out there. I've known him for years. He's come on this show. There's not like you talk to anybody, they don't really have any bad things to say about Ron. However, people do make mistakes, and I think he erred last night. He may not have been paying attention, which has been suggested, but he erred last night by giving the thumbs up at the end of that segment and not challenging Don on what Don said.
Yeah.
There's a chance he didn't catch it, and I'm not making excuses for the guy.
I'll do it. So the earpiece thing, there's probably people talking in his ear, doing the countdown.
Yeah.
Now, he's been on TV forever, so he's probably used to it by now. When it happens to me on ice surfing, you can watch my brain short circuit. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to listen and speak at the same time.
Right.
It's really difficult. So there's a chance that the person sitting next to him on national television who was speaking, he might not have even been paying attention to what he was saying.
Right.
There's
and
a
we should
chance.
all hope that that's the case. Because otherwise, then he's sitting there, he's complicit in somebody who's clearly speaking out of line right next to him.
Right.
And I
Right.
think whether or not he heard it, he is.
Yep. It's a tough one.
Because it's not about what happened; it's about how it looks, and it's not a good look. And I gotta, if I am running Sportsnet right now, which thank God I'm not, because that would be far too much responsibility. I have to look at this as here are my two tenured heritage personalities, guys that are bankable, guys that have gotten ratings for years, and quite frankly, as part of a company that is owned by a company that primarily sells internet and cable. You want that older audience because they still buy cable. They still buy cable packages, which a lot of younger people aren't doing anymore. And if not only does this bring Don down, wherever this brings Don to, Ron is now sucked into that vortex. And Ron is the guy who is the goodwill ambassador for Hockey Night in Canada for years. And that to me is a major problem that nobody's talked about. Purely from a pragmatic perspective, if you look at it from the business side of things, they're going, this guy is such a wild card on the air and so closed off in his views that he's pulling our other personalities down with him. Like, is there a person before last night on that show with a better reputation than Ron MacLean?
Well, you look at what's hometown hockey. Like, you're a hockey evangelist.
Yes.
Ron MacLean has become a hockey evangelist. That's what hometown hockey is. Like, you go to Welland. I think they're in Welland tonight. You go out to Kamloops, home of James Myrtle. You go to, Cape Breton, you go Nunavut, you go anywhere. With that show, you become a hockey evangelist to those people, to the rest of the country, saying, look, here's hockey, here's a story that you might understand and that might reflect who you are and your reality, where you are, even though we're 3,000 kilometers away. Here's a story of Canada. That's the message that they want hometown hockey to. Hockey is for everybody. Here's Canada. We have so many differences, from out west to out east, but we have this thing that tethers us together. And now you have, after last night, you have a them and us vibe. And how can you have an evangelical view of hockey when you've othered a significant portion of this population?
Right. And what does that mean for Ron? Like, what are your thoughts on just personally? You know, he's done all those things, but this is also something that's happened. And whether or not he heard it, no matter what happened in that room, only the two of them will ever know. I don't know. But this is not a good look, and there's no escaping that. This is unacceptable, and there's no escaping that.
Not to make a joke of it, but I'm picturing that scene from Anchorman where "Go F yourself, San Diego," and he didn't realize he said it. And I think that went pretty well, and everyone else in the studio is like, "Did you hear what you just said?"
Well, I don't know. The weird thing about all this, guys, is that this segment made it online. It made it through the editing bay and was posted on the internet, and then overnight they took it down.
I used to post those. Yeah. So that call came from.
But how did the editors not say, "Yeah, I probably shouldn't post this"?
Well, it's on the internet. Who's going to see it on the internet?
Yeah, right. And once you delete it, it's gone.
It's gone.
Never see it again. That's a tough
Forever.
one. That's a tough one for the editor. I'll just say because
that's fair.
Your job. You have your list of stuff that you're supposed to post.
Your job is to do your job. And
your job is to do your job.
My job is to post Hockey Night in Canada every Saturday. You just do it.
And it's sponsored content. So if you just on a whim go, "Oh, I'm not going to post this."
Well, you wouldn't do that, but you'd have to flag it.
Well, I think you're overestimating the amount of pull someone who just posts clip online has.
Fair. That's why I'm
mean?
bringing it up.
Yeah, so I would not blame that person. I'd say it didn't go ideally, but it went about as well as it could have gone.
Okay.
I think like the fact that it went up is bad. The fact that it was taken down is good. Should have never been up. It's down.
Right. And Sean, you've been following this all day. What have you deduced from all of this other than some executives had a bad day? Where do you think this goes? You said it's building. Like, what does it build into?
That's the whole story. It's 10 words. Executives had a bad day. 30. Please subscribe to The Athletic.
And there are a lot of people felt alienated too, and I think we should talk about that.
Yeah, part of it was sort of gathering reaction. So, some of it, I reached out to some of the folks on Twitter who sort of shared their story and their reaction, whether it be, grandparents who fought in the Second World War from India and Pakistan, where they grew up before partition, and the sacrifices that they made, and how that that's basically been pushed aside by this, and the anger of growing up and believing that you're bringing your children into a better Canada than the one that you had to endure because of who you are and what you wore or the color of your skin. That all of these things have been moved past. Obviously, they're not saying that they thought until Don Cherry that we'd move past all these things, but that steps had been taken and that, they were moving, we were moving in the right direction as a country, and that they were bringing their children into a better Canada than the one that they had inherited. And what this was like, well, no, like these perspectives can still be shared on a national platform for an audience of untold millions. Mm-hmm. I guess it's not going to be untold when we get the overnight ratings. And when it goes onto the internet, I mean, if people ever figure out what the internet is and dial into it,
maybe one day,
to dial up. But no, that's the thing. So yeah, today, I guess the short version of that rambling answer is he hurt people. You distill it down. He hurt people in a deep, meaningful way, and that's not going to be erased or healed real quick.
All right. No. Well, listen, it was not the fun topics everybody wanted to talk about, but I still think it was worth broaching. Guys, appreciate your thoughts. Does anybody have any parting thoughts on that before we go?
Well,
before we move to the games and everything else going on in the NHL.
It's so many levels down from mattering, but I'm embarrassed. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like seeing all this shit all day, and I sent a text to the person who manages Sportsnet's Twitter, and I was just like, praying for you today, and they were like, thanks.
Yeah.
It's just and I know myself and this person, there's lots of others.
Right.
It's embarrassing.
And anybody that listens to the show and feels like a second-class citizen because of the comments, you're not. This is one man. Mm-hmm. I think we are true believers that it is for everyone, but I think we need to do a better job of making people feel that way. And that's sort of where we do want to talk to you, Sean, about that with the book and everything, because from what I understand, hockey, people signing up for hockey is way down in the last 10 years.
My thought when he said you people, I'm like, Don, they're not watching.
Yeah.
The people you're talking about are not watching.
And that's, are we getting into this
Yeah.
here? Like,
Yeah,
we're
let's
getting
do
into the preface, the forward, and all that stuff. Yeah, no. So, I mean, my wife is, she was born in Mumbai. Her family's from Goa, which is a beautiful beach, sort of touristy region in India. And she moved here when she was 10. God, I'm going to get in trouble. Was it 12? Please. Oh, God. 10 or 12. Long time ago.
Yeah.
Didn't have a real connection to hockey, even though she, grew up here for a lot of her formative years. And we have 2 children, an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old, and she is now a fully fledged hockey mom. Our 8-year-old's on the ice, and this is going to sound really gross, but he's on the ice like 5 times a week. Our 4-year-old daughter, the future all-time penalty minutes leader for the Canadian Olympic women's team, she just started hockey school a couple weeks ago. So we're in the rink all the time.
Right.
And I would, a bit like Steve, I didn't get to play organized hockey until, I started when I was 13. So when I went
really
through,
good.
When I went through the first time, I didn't really understand all of this stuff. But now going through it with this lens, and I'm building back to the book here, I swear.
No.
Going through it with kids and with somebody who's going in through hockey the first time, you really see the benefit of what hockey is that we take for granted. And that you can have somebody in Vancouver or Halifax or Saskatoon and have nothing in common. Like one could be NDP, conservative, liberal, whatever. One could be a farmer, one could be a butcher, baker, candlestick maker, whatever. But there's a real good chance that right now you have a background in hockey, or you play beer league hockey, or that you're a terrible hockey, or whatever. You've got a kid in hockey, so you can say, oh my God, this cost me this much. You have that tether. So that if you land together at a conference in Windsor, Ontario for something, and you end up in a bar, you have that tether as Canadians. If I can make maybe a clearer example, last year our son was starting grade 2 at a school here in Toronto, and a little boy had just moved here from Vancouver, and he was wearing a Canucks hat. Didn't know a soul, like brand new, like in the city for about a month. So the teacher looks at this little boy and our little guy and knows our little guy is a hockey nut. And again, knowing that 7-year-olds are notoriously unreliable journalists, I'm told the conversation went something like this when she put them together, that my favorite player is Brock Besser. I love PK Subban. I play for East York. I play for Ted Reed. You want to be best friends? Let's be best friends. So now that little boy's dad is on my Thursday night beer league team. Those 2 boys are inseparable. That little boy has a sister, and his sister and our daughter are friends. That we had dinner together 3 weeks ago as 2 families. Like, so from nothing more than having hockey, that connected 2 families from, British Columbia to Ontario, just through hockey. Would they have found each other without it? Maybe, maybe not. But through that thing. And I think that interaction, that transaction repeats itself more often than we even understand, because it's just always been there as Canadians. The challenge now is that with fewer Canadians signing up, with fewer Canadians having that tether to the game, we're allowing barriers to grow up around it where, this wonderful thing that we can all share, fewer of us are able to share it. And that's going to be a real problem.
Well, what are those barriers?
Oh, God. Does this go on until Thursday?
Yeah, we got a 2-hour show, so
that's
you
awesome.
got time.
Yeah, awesome. No, it'll be Don Cherry's great-great-grandchildren who will be hosting Coach's Corner by the time we're done here. So the barriers. One is cost. I mean, we've been talking about that since, I had hair. And that's, we're on podcast. So that's a really long time. I'm very bald, is what I'm saying. So the cost, the legend of the $300 stick isn't a legend. It's real. But that's been going on for decades, right? It's been really expensive. Now it's that at the grassroots level, the game's being professionalized. So baby Steve Dangle today can go and he'll have a coach come out every Wednesday practice who will be a skills development coach that'll work with his peewee or his tyke team. And there'll be a professional skills coach to work with the goalie on his team. And then at March break, Christmas break, and summer break, he can go to a week-long hockey camp where he's on the ice 5 hours a day at a CrossFit gym for another hour of the day, and then go for lunch. And it's $800 a week, so there's $2,400 there. So the professionalization raises the cost exponentially more than just the $300 hockey stick. That's just a capital investment. Now you have the soft costs of, do you have a car? Do you have the kind of job where you can piece out of work on a Friday? Because that's when hockey tournaments start now, on a Friday. So you have to pull little Jane or little Jimmy out of school on a Friday. So you have to get out of work. Can you get out of work at 3:15 because your kid has a game on the other side of town in Toronto at 6:30, and you have to be there an hour before? Do you have the willingness to give up your weekends from now until the end of time, or May, because you have practices every weekend if you're just above house league. So you're not going to go skiing. You're not going to sit down and watch college football. You're not going to like do crochet or anything that you enjoy doing because it's going to be in that rink. That if you're in a little bit, you're in a lot. And then the other barrier is the retention. That hockey for the kids, like we're talking right off the top about how much fun it was to play the other night, right? Like all of us were out on the ice and having fun. For kids, because of the professionalization, like imagine that, except you had an adult out there yelling, dump it in. What are you doing? You can't circle. You can't do that lazy cut. Like, it's not fun. So kids who are in it are dropping out because they're like, this sucks. I can do a million different things.
Every time I walk by a pad of ice in an arena with a kid and a skills coach on it, the kid never looks stoked to be there.
No,
they always look so miserable.
So, I mean...
And they're also really good.
There's so many ways to go with this, but like Hockey Canada's trying to say, hey, coaches, make sure you have fun, right? But coaches are beholden, like some are paid coaches. I'm a volunteer coach with our kids team, and we have fun. Like we do fun drills. Like you remember American Gladiators, like the old one from the 80s and 90s?
It was great.
Yeah. Your favorite game was probably the one that they played at the end where there was the gladiator with the tennis ball cannon.
Oh,
They're trying to peg
Trying to
people
shoot
up.
them
Yeah,
up.
right?
Yeah.
Like, it's the best thing in the world. So there's a Hockey Canada drill in one of their books, and they have giant books for each age group that are like lesson plans, like teachers have, except for coaches. And they call it Hockey Gladiators. So you have pylons, and they're zigzags. So you have the kids start in the corner, and they skate around one pylon, skate around the other pylon, get to the third, pick up a puck, go around a fourth pylon, and then shoot on the net. Easy, right? Yeah, except there's a coach with a giant bucket of tennis balls firing the tennis balls at the kids. Now, the first time we did this, it horrified the parents. And to be clear, we also had a coach whose kill rate was a little bit higher than maybe should have been. But what it does is it teaches the kids, duck down, skate with your head up, work inside edge, outside edge. And they're doing all of this stuff. They're learning all these really important skills while having a blast. And it's great, and Hockey Canada provides a lot of these ideas. The challenge is that coaches, that's kind of, counterintuitive, that you want them to work on their inside edge, outside edge in a drill that looks like they're performing something in a hockey game. And those aren't fun. Those are what I imagine like a Soviet practice looked like in 1968. Like, it's very emotionless, it's very clinical, it's not a lot of fun. So unless you have coaches across the country who buy into that fun principle, kids are going to peace out because it's not fun. Mm-hmm. So these
it's not creative.
No, and these are all barriers that we've allowed to grow up around the game: the professionalization, the cost rising, the fact that there are indirectly, ways that we've othered people, that, because minor hockey associations, which are run by really, really well-meaning people, but they're volunteers. And if they don't have connections to communities that aren't represented directly into that rink, they have real challenges reaching into those communities. So, we're talking about Brampton, which has struggled mightily. Like, there was a stat 20 years ago in Brampton, 4,200 kids were playing hockey in Brampton. So what's happened in the intervening 20 years? The population of Brampton has gone on like aviation fuel to the moon and back, right? There's 2,000 kids playing hockey in Brampton right now. So why is that? Oof. It's because you're not reaching communities.
It's funny because my parents came here in the 80s as immigrants from Caribbean islands, and hockey was never in the spectrum for me to play. Like, I played high-level sports up until like my teenage years, but it was never hockey. And like, I think about all those barriers you listed, and those are exactly the reasons why. And then when I go into my adulthood, I don't really see my kid playing hockey either because of the next steps of just how expensive it is and how just everything you need to do to get into hockey. And it's like, that'll be like, I'm a Canadian now. Like, I was born here. They became Canadians, but my kids might still not be able to play hockey, which is such a shame because of all the great stuff it brings to like your life growing up.
Like, we're talking about not even growing up, like, and this is a second. I lost count of how many tent poles we've talked about here, but like the other night, we're on the ice, like.
Mm-hmm. That was like probably my 10th time ever being on ice. And I'm going to play my second game ever next Friday. And I'm 27 now.
Was that fun?
Oh my God, it was unbelievable.
That's what
it's the best time ever.
You disagree, but you're way better than you were last year.
And you're way better than you should be. Like, it's not fair. Yeah, he's clearly an athlete. Like,
yeah, but I didn't grow up playing. And
so in the room before, you showed up a bit late, so there wasn't before, but afterwards, like, joking around, hanging out, like, you're making connections, whether or not you realize or not. Like, that's what that is, right? Like, there's a reason they call it beer league, and it's because you're hanging out there and you're chatting and you're, refreshing friendships or whatever it is. that's half the fun. So
Yeah.
you're being physically active on the ice. That's, well, I mean, okay, other people are being physically active. I'm sitting there coasting in the neutral zone, but like everybody else is being physically active. But it's the social connections after. So why isn't that so widely available to everybody?
And if you look at just the environment around the game, if I say, hey, my kid can play hockey or he can play soccer, where he's going to see a bunch of more kids from different backgrounds who are going to be more accepting of who he is or who she is, I would probably lean towards that one. Would I not, just by default?
And it's also the time contribution, what you can manage.
Equipment
what the
contribution.
kid likes.
Right.
It's a pair of shoes and a soccer ball.
Yeah, I played baseball because it was easy. I paid for the uniform and a glove and a bat.
I mean, and to be clear, like adults can we swear here?
Yeah.
Adults can fuck up anything they touch. But like high-level basketball is ridiculously expensive. If you're listening to this podcast and you were a competitive swimmer, or if you're
Dancer.
if your
Competitive
child's
dance.
in competitive
Oh
dance,
shit, my cousins.
like
yeah.
if you have a kid in competitive dance, and like those are great pursuits because your kid's being active, your kid's making friends, your kid's doing all of these things, learning physical literacy, which helps develop confidence in a whole bunch of different facets of life. So competitive dance and competitive swimming are amazing. But if you're listening to that and you have experience in those, you're like, hockey's the cheapest fucking thing in the earth.
Yeah.
Like, no, but the reason we're picking on hockey here is because hockey was on the back of our $5 bill. Like, hockey's what Rock Carrier wrote about in The Hockey Sweater. And we close our eyes and you think of what does it mean to be Canadian. And as it relates to hockey, you think of a gentle snow falling on a frozen pond against the backdrop of children's laughter while they play hockey. That's what you think about. And that's what's supposed to bind us together. But because of all of these things that have allowed to go unchecked for so long, so many people have been streamed out of hockey that I mean, it sounds melodramatic to say, but it really is at risk of becoming a niche sport in this country.
I think it was Anthony Stewart had a pretty funny tweet a couple of weeks back. He's like, a reporter will go, so what are some of your fondest memories playing hockey on a pond growing up? And any player under 30 is like,
Yeah. It's just not a boss. Yeah.
Concordia University had a really interesting study. I guess it'd be 5 years. And I'm going to mangle all of these numbers now because I'm old and my memory's faded.
Well, we're going to tell people to buy the book anyway. So if they want to see the exact figures and then tweet you about how wrong you were afterwards,
Fair.
make
Totally
sure you
fair.
buy Sean's book.
and they will.
Before the lights go up, McClellan
right.
Stewart, a division of Penguin Random House.
From Penguin Random House.
Concordia University did a study years ago, and there's other ones like rinkwatch.org do it too, where I think they said that to have good outdoor natural ice, you need 3 days straight of -5 or below. So it has to be -5 below for 3 straight days, and you got a sheet of ice that you can play on. And they figured that with climate change and the changing patterns, that for something like 90% of the Canadian population, within 25 years, so we're probably within 20 years now, it will be impossible to have natural ice across most of Canada.
Oh, wow.
Where Canadians can play hockey because
Within
it's just going
where-
to be too warm.
In the populous areas, it just wouldn't be there.
100%. So
I've
here in
walked across
Toronto,
a frozen pond twice my entire life. I was scared shitless
right? So like
both times.
here in Toronto, we're lucky that the city has a bunch of artificially refrigerated rinks that are outdoors. I mean, they're still scheduled within an inch of their lives. Like you can't just show up after school and play, but they're there at least. But for a lot of Canadians, that outdoor pond thing is going to be like, well, why would I go swimming in December?
Yeah. Yeah. I used to skate on my parents were lucky enough to have a cottage growing up and used to skate on the ice there, when it got thick enough. And, we'd get the auger out and just check the ice levels and that sort of thing to make sure that it was thick enough. And it was, to your point, some of the most magical moments of my life are just me alone, only child, right? So there's no one to play with. It's cottage, so it's
about to
freezing
say-
cold inside. You may as well be outside.
How many people were out there with you?
Nobody's there. My parents are like, hell no. Neither of them played hockey. My dad's an auto racing fan, and my stepmom was never really into
Right.
sports. They supported me, but it was never their thing. And they are some of the best memories I've ever had. I remember... you're outside, it's quiet. It's so quiet. It's the middle of the day, and all you hear are the cracks from the lake ice in the distance, and they're terrifying. Yep. And then it's like you and your dog. And my dog, Max, used to love to chase pucks. So I'd like deke him out and put the puck through his feet and that sort of thing. He'd run after it. It was and it's such a shame that, and I realize that that's not a possibility for like 99% of people. I realize how lucky I am to have that experience. But the fact that even the people that do have that opportunity, you know, if you do live in a smaller town and you're able to go out to, you know, a frozen pond or something like that. I mean, we in Scarborough, where we grew up, we were able to go down into near the Bluffs area, and it would freeze in the wintertime near the beach.
Oh, I never
and,
went.
Yeah, and you could skate on that, and because that was a lot of fun. But the fact that will not even be a possibility, just based on climate change, will suck. And it, you know, okay. So how much? So we rented ice at an arena at 10 o'clock.
That is a barn.
Like
it's a barn.
Oh, yeah.
The arena's got to be 50 years old. It's Moss Park Arena. Look it up.
Oh, you had a ridiculous stat about arenas in Toronto.
Well, hang on.
Sorry.
Let me finish this first.
Sorry, that was so rude.
Just to that point about cost, right? Steve Dangle podcast.
Points at guys said that was ridiculous.
I know, right? I know. So how many guys were there? How many guys were there, Steve?
12.
12
of us.
12
Yep.
guys. It was still $25 a guy.
Yeah.
For 1
that
hour.
1 hour.
Just
1
1
hour
hour.
in a barn. And by the way, this was Moss Park, which is my neighborhood, by the way, is one of the tougher areas in downtown Toronto. And frankly, there's not a lot of people there on a Friday night anyway. And it's not one of those arenas that on a Friday night, like there's men's leagues forever. Like you go to Oakville and they get the big sliding doors and the 40 rinks and the bars upstairs. This is not one of those. This is like everything you imagine from like 40s, 50s, 60s hockey. This is what this place is. And it was still $300.
And like drinking
rent
out
it.
of the tap. Like, well, I've had a good life.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. You have to wear, you're not going in the shower with bare feet. Like, it's one of those. Like, and I found that interesting. I was like, holy smokes, it's still $300
And
to
it's
rent
like
this.
the barrier for the professional level, going back to what you're saying, is in other sports it's more, but it's just culturally hockey's so important that the barrier to just play every day should be so much easier. Like I knew guys who went down to the States because there's not opportunities to play basketball here and like AAU. So the barrier for professional basketball is I have to move countries. But for hockey, the barrier to just play should be so easy. It shouldn't be $25 for 1 hour.
No.
It should just be, hey, let's go do this.
Right.
And in some, the ridiculousness that you were talking about earlier is that basically in Toronto, speaking just here, municipal rinks haven't really been built since 1967, since the Centennial Fund. So some of the new rinks that you have in this city are privately owned. So if you're playing a beer league, it's going to be privately owned, and those prices can be, I mean, they're 400 plus sometimes. And depending on the time, you're paying a premium for that ice time. So it's really expensive. So then you can counter with saying, well, why don't you just have your kid play house league? House leagues in the city, they're fine. They're great. You play a game every Saturday, and you can practice every other Sunday. So that's 6 hours of ice time a month. That's basically, going for a music lesson, which is great. It's fine. It's good. It's important to know music and have music lessons, but that's not sort of what we're talking about. If you're just on the ice 4 hours a month for hockey, that's not what we're talking about when we talk about hockey. We're talking about something that, Rock Carrier, and it's it might be my favorite short story about anything, anywhere, at any time, was he'd go to school and he'd think about hockey. He'd go to, listen to Maurice Richard on the radio and the Montreal Canadiens and think of hockey, that it was what he loved and he could access it in any number of ways. Where if you just play house league, you're doing it once a week for 1 hour. So then why don't you go to the competitive level, which is select, which is, the level that our 8-year-old plays, and our 4-year-old, assuming she stays out of legal trouble and between now and then, will eventually play. But then you're drinking out of the fire hose, and that's everything we're talking about. Like he has, I'm a volunteer coach, ripping the sweater actually. He's on the ice Wednesdays, and that's skills day. So we have a professional coach come and skate and work on skills with the kids.
Former NHLer?
No, I don't know. He's definitely more skilled than me. And then that's at one end of the ice. At the other end of the ice, we have a professional goalie instructor work with our goalies. That's once a week. And we're a novice team. So they're 8 years old, going on 9. And it only goes up from here. So, by the time you get to your minor midget year, if you are in that competitive stream, and I'm not saying that we'll be there, if you're AAA minor midget, like if you're a parent, you can easily expect a $15,000 door charge.
Jesus.
Right?
That's like, how? Like, how
no
could
wonder.
you...
Dude,
That's
there's
a
like
new Honda
40
Civic.
last names in the NHL. Like, no wonder. Right?
If you go, so one of the really cool things that I like going to do is going to the Top Prospects game, the GTHL, which is the biggest minor hockey organization on this planet, not this country, this planet. And they have a Top Prospects game, so that's the best minor midget kids in the city. Those are the kids who are primed for the OHL draft, usually. I mean, they can go to college or whatever, but usually the OHL draft. So they all go there, and their parents are there, and these are still 15-year-old kids. So they're not driving yet. So their parents are out there. And you pull into the parking lot. And there are a whole bunch of times. I've gone, I think, 3 years in a row. And I pulled in and I've looked around. I'm like, they're going to call the police on me. Because somebody's going to say, there's a Honda Civic in this parking lot. I don't know what that person's motivations are, but it doesn't belong here.
It should be with all these Mercedes.
Yeah, because here's a Mercedes, a Range Rover, a Lexus, a Beamer, like a hovercraft. Somebody brought like their rocket ship. Like it was really weird, right? But like, and then you go inside and you're like, wow, like I don't make enough to like anything. Like it's the stratosphere is. I think we really don't understand it. Like the Hamilton Spectator, maybe this will help it. The Hamilton Spectator 5 years ago, Terry Pekoski, who's a wonderful journalist, she did just a brilliant series trying to quantify what I'm now stammering over. And what she did was she sent away to all of the OHL teams saying, look, I don't want private data of the kids on your roster. Just give me the postal codes of where they live. That's all I want, just their postal codes. Give me the postal codes. And I think all but 3 or 4 teams got back to her. So what she did was she ran those postal codes through StatsCan data. And what she found was, and again, because my memory's terrible, I'm going to mangle these exact numbers, but it was something like 80% of kids came from cities, urban areas. So like Ottawa, Toronto, the Windsor corridor. And of those 80% of those came from parts of the cities where the median income was much higher than everywhere else. So what you get is a picture of, you know, it's not the guys that Tom Cochrane used to sing about in Big League where hockey was the one way out of the mining town. It's like you're from a really nice part of a really nice city and you have access to all of these teaching tools and the best coaches that money can buy to get you to this level.
Wow. It's funny in sports like football in the States, and this might have something to do with the fact that refrigeration is expensive. You can play football pretty much at any point, right? Like you can play it all year long if you want to. Football, basketball, high-level basketball, yeah, granted, is expensive, but you see a lot of guys in football and basketball specifically, and I guess you could say the same for all the guys that come from Latino countries in baseball. A lot of these guys are coming from nothing. They come from nothing. They have backgrounds where, you know, they happen to be brilliant athletically and they were able to raise themselves up, and that's amazing, right? I don't hear a lot of rags to riches stories in hockey. Like Wayne Simmons is one. And the only reason I know that story is because, you know, we grew up with Wayne.
We grew up with him. Well, you did. And he's like an elder statesman now.
Yeah, yeah, but you don't hear, like, you hear in football every year, you know, here's a guy who, you know, from a single parent home who went through this and went through that, and they were on food stamps. Like, you hear that all the time, and those stories are brilliant. You don't hear that in hockey. You just don't. It's he's so-and-so's son, he's so-and-so's nephew. And I wanted to ask you about this because obviously there's a genetic component in families where if you are an athlete, you are genetically probably predispositioned to be, you got better hand-eye coordination, you probably heal faster. There's a bunch of things that when they study athletes, they're like, they're a little bit different than the rest of us.
You did watch me play the other night. Yeah. I am flattered.
Such grace.
I can't speak. I'm just going to hang up and listen.
But we're seeing this more and more. Someone's son, someone's nephew, someone who already made it, and then all of a sudden it's like they had all the tools in front of them for someone else to make it. And that in a vacuum, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you get too inside with it, then you're excluding everyone. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, to back up to the other sports, you know, baseball and basketball, like those are getting ruined too. The New York Times did a really neat feature, again, I think it was last year, it could have even been earlier this year, about campuses in the U.S. that are growing up around, not university or college campuses, but like for these tournaments, so AAU tournaments or baseball tournaments, that these, you know, they have a bunch of gyms, they have a bunch of fields, and they have a bunch of hotels. It's like smart centers. or you have the malls and it's all in there.
Yeah.
So what they do is like, hey, you're playing in this tournament, you're going to play on these fields, you're staying in these hotels, and since we're out in the middle of nowhere, you're going to eat in these restaurants. It's an entire industry built up around youth sports. So it costs money, basketball, baseball, whatever. It's really expensive. So it's not just hockey. The reason we're singling out hockey here is because, again, it's on the back of our $5 bill.
Cultural.
It's, one of our 2 official sports, all of these things.
Right.
And yeah, there are stories of, not everybody in hockey is filthy rich, but it doesn't hurt.
Like anything, I guess.
But it's just like, sorry to go back to our shinny session last Friday, but
It was that good, everybody.
it was that good.
so good.
Fabulous hockey.
Well, Jesse and I are talking as hat trick getters.
Right?
You got 4.
Yeah, Austin Matthews over
It
here.
was pretty good when there's no goalie.
But like, if last Friday the 12 of us didn't have $25, but we all wanted to play sports, we would go out and we'd play basketball or soccer.
Something else.
We wouldn't pick hockey if we didn't have the money to.
Yeah, or the gear, think of, this is the other point that was raised over the course of this book. It was 3 years of sort of exploring all of this stuff, and I think it was more than 200 interviews. So I was really lucky that a lot of people gave me their time to sort of share their stories. And the other one that, again, if you're in the game, you don't really think about. If you're in that bubble, is the delta that we ask people to cross now, that if you're not in hockey, like if you're a parent and you're not in hockey, you don't have a background in hockey, the delta of signing your kid up and getting them all this gear, like, does the shin pad go on before the pants? Do the skates go on before the pants? Like these things that you used to just sort of absorb through osmosis, because like gym class, I grew up in Burlington, so the Halton district, like part of our gym class would be like a couple times a month you do public skating down at the local rink, right? Like you get skates, you get a crappy pair of skates, and you learn from just looking at the person next to you, oh, the skates go on this way or whatever. Like, so if you're new to the country or you're new to the game, you have to navigate all of this stuff. What kind of equipment do you need to get? And there's so much equipment now that, neck guards, jocks, cups. Do you get garters, or do you get the long pants? Like there's such a variety. It can be really daunting, and people are so busy now that like, well, I could get those 14 different things, or we could just go do something else. And if it's just do something else, then do something else looks real easy because we're all busy, right? And like there's lots of choice. There's lots of things, and kids have more choice, and kids have more things. And you can not play sports at all. You can play esports. You can be on Twitch. You can do a whole bunch of things. And if hockey's just a thing, man, like it's really easy to scratch off that thing and do something else.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's not all glamorous. You did have to ride the bus with the Peterborough Petes there, which I think was right at the beginning of the book. You got to ride with some of the most near and dear people to our listeners' hearts.
One of the best defensemen in the system.
Yes.
The Toronto Maple Leaf system.
Nick
was
Robertson.
on that bus. He's going to be maybe one of the best defensemen in Toronto. So the reason we picked Peterborough, I'll back up a bit, is that Peterborough, and I didn't know this until we really got into it, like we picked Peterborough, I'm talking about my editor, Jordan Ginsburg, and I, because Peterborough is kind of a proxy for the rest of Canada on so many things, like something like 14 of the last 15 federal elections, that if your party wins its seat in Peterborough, you form government in Ottawa.
Wow.
And the streak is even longer provincially, that if you win the seat in Peterborough, you go on to form the government in Queen's Park, something like 16 of the last. It's insane. And Peterborough used to be the town where, I don't know, say you wanted to test the Timbit that was going to sell a moose jaw, or Halifax, you test marketed it in Peterborough.
Wow.
Because it was reflective in so many ways politically and economically of Canada, that it became a test case. And because the Petes are a hockey team in a hockey town, we thought, why don't we explore some of these issues through the lens of the Peterborough Petes? Followed the Petes for a season and a half. They were supposed to be challenging for a Memorial Cup that year, and they had a bunch of Leafs and Leafs adjacent people. I don't know if you remember the name, Nikita Korostolev.
Oh yeah,
he could shoot the puck like a video game, but the problem was his skating. He had to work on that. Logan DeNoble came to camp as one of the guys who wears number 57. For 2 or 3 days in camp, and then just sort of goes. And then there's Nick Robertson, who's, the California-born second-round draft pick who's eventually going to be a forward with the Leafs. And
It's going to happen. Imagine they actually give him a try. They're like, hey, we need more mobility on the back end.
Yeah.
And they actually put him there.
And
Show us what you got, kid.
And SDA, Sammy
Steve
Gargachev
Preston.
was also on the team. So follow them around and sort of explored, who are the kids who are playing junior hockey, which is a step or two below the NHL? Where are they coming from? What are the challenges they're facing? And then in Peterborough, what does hockey look like in Peterborough in 2017, 2018, 2019? And yeah, Minor Hockey Association in Peterborough had lost 100 kids from their roles every year for 3 straight years. That there's a Catholic school around the corner from the rink, 400 meters away from the rink, and these folks for Try Hockey went up there, and what they do is they'll go to the school and they'll hold an assembly and say, hey, who plays hockey? And then they'll play ball hockey and say, if you haven't played ice hockey but you're curious, come to the rink this weekend, we'll set you up, we'll get you on the ice, blah, blah, blah. They went and held an assembly at the school, and they're like, hey, who plays hockey? 400 kids, not a single hand went up. Oh. That's in Peterborough, Ontario, Canada. And yeah, they have a vibrant and growing house league basketball program.
Sure.
Fleming College has a cricket program. There's a travel cricket program in the city. The president of the Peterborough Hockey Association went to get his haircut in the middle of peat season, and the family there, everybody was wearing TFC shirts. And they didn't want to talk about Pete's, they want to talk about TFC. All of the pressures that we're talking about here, esports, other sports, not playing any sports, underrepresented communities, they all exist in Peterborough. And that's why we wanted to spend that time exploring them through the lens of the Pete's and Peterborough.
Let me ask you something. Do you think that Hockey Canada and upper leadership at the NHL level, obviously the Americans have their own system and that sort of thing, but the most, as Canadians, we hear most from Gary Bettman and Bill Daly, and we hear from the Hockey Canada group, which used to be Bob Nicholson, who's now with the Oilers. Do you think they're equipped or even aware?
That was one thing, is that I expected to go through this and run into, I was going to say Don Cherry, but I don't want to mention that name again today, was, a bunch of people who say, oh, hockey's fine. Like, what are you talking about? This whole thing, hockey's fine. Like, get your head out of your ass. All of the Minor Hockey Association people I spoke with, and I traveled Saskatoon. I talked to people out in BC. I talked to people in Montreal and Ottawa and out east. They all said, yeah, it's expensive. We have problems reaching out to new communities. There are success stories in that regard for sure, but by and large, they have issues. And Tom Rennie, who is near the head of Hockey Canada, understands the issues. He acknowledges that they exist. The challenge is going to be, how do you find solutions? And then how do you implement them? Because in Canada, a solution that might work here in Toronto, we're talking about Moss Park, which is a vital downtown recreational facility for hockey. And it is a great sheet of ice. It's expensive, but it's a good sheet of ice.
It wasn't,
coming up with a solution that might work in Moss Park isn't going to work in one of those massive megaplexes out in Mississauga or Oakville, or out in Brampton, or out in one of the brand new ones at Oshawa or Whitby. If you have that problem here in Southern Ontario, imagine finding a solution that'll also work in Saskatoon and Cole Harbour or whatever. So what are the solutions, and then how do you possibly implement them in a place so broad and diverse as Canada? And that's where the real challenge is going to be, because there are ideas to address some of the things we're talking about, whether it be cost or accessibility, but how do you come up with a national scheme?
Did they have any theories on how they could do that?
Yeah, there's a couple of things here. So one is, we talked about fun. How do you make it fun? So we'll start with that, and then we'll go on to the money side of it. The fun part is that, when baby Steve Dangle would have been 4, 5, 6, 7, and you didn't get a chance to play, but if you had, you would have had to play full ice. So you would have been playing against kids who were skating since they were spermatozoa.
Yep.
Boom.
Now, when I started in grade 4, that's what happened.
Right.
Were you already behind?
Oh,
and you're just getting windmilled, right? Turnstile, the whole game.
Yeah.
The whole game.
Wow.
And it's not fun.
awful.
It's not fun.
When I was 10 years old, my parents
fascinating.
said, hey, if you want, we'll put you in hockey. And all my friends play rep. And I'm like, dude, I'm going to have a terrible time. So I
Somebody
said
should
no.
put that in a profile somewhere. They should include that line in a profile.
I'm glad I started it.
It'd be really
'cause
good.
I caught up. but it took a lot of time. It took a lot of practice.
Right. So what they've done now, and that's not fun, right? So you peeled out. You didn't pursue it.
I didn't even get on the ice.
Right?
Yeah.
So what they do now is Hockey Canada had developed, I think it's something like 35 years ago, this thing they call the initiation program. They didn't mandate it. So, Sweden, a lot of Scandinavian countries mandated it. USA Hockey adopted it. Somebody named Austin Matthews ended up playing in a system very familiar to this. And what they do is, so at 4, 5, and 6, you don't play full ice because that's ridiculous. Why would you play that full sheet of ice?
200 feet for a kid with little legs?
The best thing
ridiculous.
is the first period intermission where they do the Timbits hockey, and you watch them just go, and it takes them like 15 seconds, just all the way.
30 strides to get from blue line to blue line.
Which is, oddly enough, pretty representative of what we did on the ice on Friday.
Yes.
night.
Yeah.
But so what they do now is they divide the ice into thirds. So you play half sideboard to sideboard. So if you think about, you divide it into thirds. So from the blue line in and the blue line in, playing sideboard to sideboard, you have 2 games. So you have 8 kids in each game, right? And then in the middle, you have a water station and some skills development where they go around cones and do that stuff. And then you rotate. So the kids are on the ice for the full hour. So instead of driving and being on the ice 1 every 3 shifts, you're on the ice basically the whole time. The second best part of this, there's no scoreboard. So there's no parents yelling, shoot, shoot.
So there's a lot of people who are upset about that.
Oh, 100%. Because it doesn't look like hockey. And that's the point. And the genius of this is that we're talking about, your memories of being up at the cottage and sort of the weird sense of purity of just being out there on the ice and playing. So what it allows is at this entry level now, it sort of replicates pond hockey. There's no adults out there yelling at them because there's no scoreboard. I mean, the parents are all leaning over the railings, drinking their terrible arena coffee that's been filtered through a sweat sock. And they're watching it. But what they're watching is the kids are just goofing around. They're spinning, they're passing, they're touching the puck more, they're shooting the puck more. Goalies are facing more shots. And then as they get up, at novice, so our son's 8 years old, they now play half ice. So they put a big sort of temporary arena board in the middle on the red line, and you can have 2 games going at once.
Wow.
So again, you come off the ice for 1 shift, you're on. So you're on every other shift. But again, you can have the kids who have been skating since they were spermatozoa at one end, and they can swim like sharks and kill each other over here. And then you have the kids who are learning at their own pace at the other end. So they can touch the puck more. They can build confidence, develop their skills at their own pace. And eventually, guess what happens? If they have fun, they will catch up with the other kids.
Yeah.
And that's what happens is that, the challenge with hockey is that they stream kids out by the time they're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, which is just bonkers because they're not having fun or they're getting turnstiled. Whereas other sports, such as basketball or football, that you can walk into high school and be like, hey, I've got 4 years here to develop both physically, mentally, emotionally. That's not both. That's 3 things. And I have I have a longer window to develop into this game. Whereas hockey, we seem to say, oh, if you're not a superstar by 12, sorry, dude. Sorry, little girl, you're out.
Yeah.
So what Tom Rennie's doing and what Hockey Canada is doing by implementing this system, which will then continue to go up until about the Pee-wee level, is trying to preserve some of that fun. That's just one aspect. But again, there was huge pushback. In Toronto, there were threats of lawsuits of, you can't tell me how to teach my children how to play hockey. There are renegade leagues for 5-year-olds where parents can have their children play full ice. They're not sanctioned by Hockey Canada. They cost a ton of money. They're run, kind of a sort of aside from the regular Hockey Canada programming. But you can have your little daughter play full ice if you want at 5 years of age.
Imagine running a renegade league for an actual toddler.
But you know what you're doing? You're making tons of money.
Because
there's so much money.
I got to tell you, when I first heard that they weren't keeping score, I kind of hated it because one of the things that I loved
is yelling at little children. You got to shoot the puck. You're the guy at the Canada Center.
I
Shoot.
love that. Yeah, no, I know.
You don't score, you're walking home.
The reason I hated it was because you took so much pride in winning.
But the kids keep score. But the kids know what the score is.
For sure, the kids do. And I thought about that later. Right? Because initially it's a new idea, so you're like, reject it. And then, well, maybe I'll think about that 100%. A little bit. And so what I remember was I hated to lose, but I had to learn how. I had to learn how to accept that. And I think the argument against what you're saying is, well, these kids are never going to learn how to lose. We're just going to hold their hand through life and they've got to learn how to lose. But the kids do know.
Yeah.
Like they're keeping
yeah.
track of how many goals they had. Like we do. Steve just mentioned it here. He talked about how many goals he had and how many goals Jesse had.
I know how many
and
goals
we're in
I
our
scored.
30s, except for Jesse. Like, and so so that's something that they'll keep track of anyway.
I wish the reasoning that was brought up in opposition of this was as deeply thought out as the point you just raised. Because a lot of it that I heard in some of the meetings was like, well, how are they going to learn offsides?
Oh.
If there's no blue line, how are they going to learn offsides? They're not learning the proper game. And it's like, well,
They'll pick that up.
Dude, they don't know how to move yet.
no, I mean, some of them still,
Skate 'em.
like
Skate
at
'em.
5 years old, if you think back, like,
I
there's
didn't know
still
what
like a 30% chance that at least once a month they're peeing the bed at night. Like, they're not reading full chapter books. Like, why do they need to know offside?
Who cares?
true.
Just let's have them handle the puck
I'm
for a couple
projecting.
strides.
That's actually just me that has that.
No,
Actually, it's once a
no.
month.
I peed the bed till later. So much later.
All the way through freshman year.
I did last night. The Leafs lost. It's a habit of mine. There was a tweet last night from Evolving Wild that was, which is Adam's burner account. I'm
That's right.
convinced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is smart, Adam.
Yeah, and it was just, do you ever just stop and think about how hard hockey is? So, like, when I was playing soccer at like 4, 5, 6 years old, you want to keep score then, I think that's fine. Hockey at that age? Dude, you don't even know what you're doing. You don't have full control of your body when you're on the ice. What's the point of, learning the rules, let alone keeping score?
It's fun now that like the really fun part is watching them when they do develop and they do learn. And so we spent I don't know how long here just crapping all over the game at the grassroots level
That we all love.
that we all love. And there's a reason because it is hockey and we pick on it because it historically has a lot of meaning to us. But the real benefit here is that you mentioned the curve. Like hockey is a strange game to pick up, especially at 4, 5, 6. But now that like we're at, for the eldest 8 going on 9 and the youngest who's 4 and in hockey school, you see what they learn and the confidence. So, there's a tournament in Buffalo last year and there were 7 and 8 back then. And so we stayed in Niagara Falls at a hotel and they had a couple games downtown and a beautiful outdoor facility that they have in Buffalo. Like gorgeous. It's covered outdoor arena and then a couple up in Niagara Falls. But every second that they weren't on the ice, they were in the hotel pool. Every second that they weren't in the hotel pool or on the ice, they were playing mini sticks in the rented room that we had. And then they're having pizza together. They're playing tag. They're hanging out. The parents are hanging out. So, we live in the most populous city in Canada. And our corner of East York feels like Norwood or like, Listowel, Letterkenny. It feels like something like that because the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, that, these kids don't go to school together, but, they are from, again, not as varied as they should be, but they're from different backgrounds, different parts. And they build that, the physical literacy of being on the ice and doing all that crazy stuff on the ice, but the social engagement, the fun stuff that they're going to remember forever that, maybe they don't have the cottage where they can go and skate outdoors because, by the way, there's just icebergs now because the whole lake's melted.
Right.
But they have those memories of playing hockey and they'll have those relationships for probably a little bit longer than they will for the kids that they went to kindergarten with because they're playing hockey with these kids for 3, 4, 5 years. Mm-hmm. And that's the real benefit, that they have so much fun. And it is so great that they can go and have these different experiences. We're going to a tournament in Barrie and we're staying in some hotel up there that has a pool and stuff like that this winter. And the kids are going to have a blast. It is such a wonderful experience. But wouldn't it be even more wonderful if everybody could experience that and not just people with the means?
Right. That's the point.
Yeah. We're fortunate. We're lucky. We have the flexibility to take time off work. Hey, boss, James Myrtle. Like we have that ability. We are lucky.
We are.
So why can't everybody have the same experience? Because you know what? They used to. Mm-hmm. Canadians used to. Gordie Howe learned to skate with a pair of rusty skates from a rucksack during the Great Depression. Like, why can't we get back
when
to
this
somewhere back
country
there?
was at its poorest, the game was easier for people to get to than now?
Think of how many guys have their names up in the rafters at Scotiabank Arena, and you're like, did that? I mean, they're hanging in Bay Street now, but like, did they have parents who worked on Bay Street? No. They worked in mining towns. The origin stories for these guys are from all over the place. But now, compare and contrast, the best Leafs of the past with the current Leafs now. And this, I'm not blaming anybody on the Leafs for where they came from. Like but take a look at where these kids come from. It's not from those northern mining towns anymore.
Right. Wow. Well, you know what? It's going to be a fascinating read, and you got to check out Before the Lights Go Out with Sean Fitzgerald. I'm sure, Sean, we're going to reference this for the rest of the show, but we do need to get to what happened in hockey in the last few days.
I feel like I haven't spoken for half an hour. I've just been a student.
I feel like this show sounds really great with us not talking on it. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah, can you frig off and not steal our jobs? Or
Sean, you were at the game last night, right? You covered it?
I was.
So
it was my first game of the year. Sorry about that, Mitch Marner.
Yeah, right. So it's all Sean's fault, just in case anyone wants to know. But we were, obviously coming out of the first period. They're down 2-0, but pretty much everybody thinks, and Steve, I need you on this one too.
Yeah, sorry.
Everybody thinks coming out of that first period that they deserve better.
I looked at it as they made their own luck a little bit. I'm not quite sure how the partial 3-on-2 started on the first goal, but Barry, I guess, didn't quite trust Matthews enough. All of a sudden, they're weak on one side, which should be fine because Jake Muzzin broke up the pass. Oh, he whacked it straight to a flyer, and now they're boned. And he puts on a perfect shot. The second one, on the power play, or on the penalty kill, I guess. Mikheyev, dumb penalty, was not a smart penalty, and the ref gave him 2 chances before that. Freddie the Goat was playing more PK than I was used to him seeing, and this was before Marner even got hurt. And I didn't like him out there at all. And then because he
isn't he just the face-off guy and then he goes off? Isn't that supposed to be his
how
role?
it's supposed to go, but it doesn't always work out that way, right? Because if you lose that face-off, all of a sudden you're just a straight-up penalty killer. So he botches that. He attacked the point when he shouldn't have, if I know the Leafs penalty kill correctly. Justin Hall is completely in no man's land. Connecting takes a shot and it goes off a friggin' shin.
Yep.
So I thought it was a bit of bad luck. I thought they made their own bad luck. They fought back to tie it with one of their best players injured, and then they lost on a thing that's not even hockey.
Right.
That's how I looked at the game.
Sean, what did you see? Would you like, would you not like?
I mean...
And also, can I ask you quickly?
Absolutely.
Were you there for the Mike Babcock comments about Tyson Barrie before the game?
No, I had an 8-year-old hockey practice. I had to be there in the morning, so I wasn't there for the morning skate.
So before you get
priorities.
Yeah, of course. Well, before you get into your thoughts, I know I've just asked you that
about
question,
the Tyke hockey practice, or
no, we do want to get those too. But the Tyson Barrie comments from Mike Babcock saying, "Hey, he's going to have to adjust because he's not going to get first line power play like he used to. So he's got to reinvent himself." Is in both your estimation, is that an unfair ask for Mike Babcock to be for Tyson Barrie, or does Tyson Barrie have enough skill that it, he might take a deduction a little bit in points this year, but it shouldn't matter. He should still play better.
It shouldn't matter. He should still play better. He's a professional. But, I mean, it was also kind of a thing to watch on that first power play. I think he got on for the last 40 seconds, and 20 of it was spent behind his net, stick handling, looking for an outlet because they're in the middle of a change. And I felt kind of bad. I'm like, here you are, 40 seconds. Oh, you got to wait for a play to develop. And then it was a turnover. So it was like watching me play on a power play. It's just like a lot of lost opportunity.
I know people were yelling for the first power play to get more time. And it looks like they're getting more this year. But it's to the point where I'm like, why even have a second unit? Because of that 20 second. They have 20 to 30 seconds to make something happen.
Yeah.
And it's just not going to happen.
And it's probably only because you can't possibly leave Morgan Riley out there for 2 minutes, because if they do get caught in the defensive zone after the penalty's over, it's like, well, he's just going to lie down and sort of take a nap and catch his breath.
There was a moment in the third period. Yeah, there was a moment in the third period where I'm like, has he left the ice? Like he was just playing so much.
Yeah.
But now you get this guy. You traded an extremely good player to get him. What are you going to do? How are you going to utilize this
And
asset?
what is the right way to use him?
Yeah, you have a
Do we even know?
right-handed shot who knows how to generate scoring that you've been dying for, and you have him for less than $3 million because for whatever reason Joe Sakic decided to retain half, and all it cost you was like Callie Rosen.
He was really good in the second unit, 3-on-3 in overtime. So you had Morgan Riley come out, and then you had Tyson Barrie go. So then those 5 minutes, maybe that's what you're playing for.
Right.
Just a really good
5-on-5.
dynamic defensive skater. And No,
Yeah.
I don't know what you do with the power play because, I mean, Morgan Riley kind of deserves it right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's
70-point season.
yeah, no,
Right.
he's pretty. I mean, I don't want to take it too complex above my understanding here, but he's pretty good at hockey,
yeah.
right? Like
I've heard that.
he's fast, he's
Yeah.
dynamic, he's been here a long time. Like it's his show, I think. So I don't know how you take that away from him unless there's a fear of wear and tear. I mean, certainly he can't play 30 minutes a night, so maybe that's the way you get around it. It's like, hey, we need you to rest up because if you get 30 minutes a night in November, that's not as important as 30 minutes a night in late April, early May.
Right.
What gets me is, okay, first unit, second unit, whatever. He's allowed to score 5-on-5. And last year with the Avalanche, he did, and he's still on pace for, I want to say, 25 points on the entire season. So I went back and I looked at some of the things the Avalanche did to help him succeed, and I just don't really feel like the Leafs do that.
They scored.
They scored. There was that. But like Nathan McKinnon, A, attacking with speed, and B, attacking the middle with speed, which they just don't do. Tyson Barrie being allowed to fly into the zone, which they just don't do.
Didn't Tyson Barrie have a quote not that long ago where he said that McKinnon would sometimes chirp him if he left the ice too early because he wanted him on the ice with him that often? Like that's
Wow.
that's a pretty good pat on the back, right? Like, but the thing is you've got Morgan Riley.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, what do you do?
Are they-
I don't know.
I think we've all seen the drop pass thing that they're doing. They keep drop
Yeah.
passing, drop
No.
pass, drop pass.
What is this development that you're talking about?
Is there another team in the league that drop passes as much as they do? And haven't we figured out by now that teams picked up on that about 18 months ago and they cannot?
Are you talking about the zone entry?
The zone entry
Yeah.
stuff is it's painful to watch, and yet it's like, and every time they do it, every time you know who it's going to, you know it'll end up with Morgan Riley or Mitch Marner. It's going to be one of the two, and then they're going to try to skate it up, and then they'll drop it to the other guy, and then try to get it to Nylander. Nylander tries to get it across, and then they gain zone entry. But
I think we
teams know.
drastically overestimated the impact Paul McFarland was going to have. This power play looks identical to last year's, except Matthews and Marner switched.
But then why is that? If they brought in a guy specifically to fix an issue, a guy who clearly had success in Florida, I think it was the number 2 power play in the league, and then he comes in and then nothing changes, then what was the change? Like,
Maybe we oversimplified the issue. I don't know.
I don't know what you mean by that.
Like maybe we're overestimating. Like it's not as simple as DJ Smith did the penalty kill, and I didn't like the penalty kill, so he has to go. And Jim Hiller did the power play, and I didn't like the power play, so Jim Hiller's got to go. Paul McFarland had a good power play in Florida, so we bring him in, and all of a sudden it's the second.
But then
best
what
in the
else could it
entire
be?
league.
Sorry, whose voice is that?
I don't know.
I don't know. That's my dumb brain voice.
But-
I'm like, oh, well, he does this. and
okay,
this.
so if it didn't fix, then what was happening?
I don't mean to pick on the guy, but the one constant on the coaching staff is the head coach.
Well, it's also the players.
It's also the players. So, I don't know.
But
Maybe
the
the
players-
players just suck on the power play.
Do you think that all those guys want to drop pass all day? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think they want to blow through the neutral zone.
Yes.
I think they want to skate because they can. I think they want to pass because they can. Why are we so? And I wonder if McFarland's coming in on. Well, I got to take some action or direction from Mike Babcock. It's not like he can just be out on his own and do whatever he wants. And Mike's like, yeah, whatever. You think Mike Babcock's the kind of guy that's not going to want some control over that? And that's to your point, Steve. I think there might be an issue there, and I wonder how long are they going to continue to go with this. And Sean, I'm really interested to get your thoughts on this. How long are they going to keep doing this, banging their heads against the wall before they go, we got to change this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a piece up on The Athletic a couple days ago.
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it. It's great. I think it was Ian Tulloch had it. Sort of mulling through some of this, which is, basically why the Leafs are playing boring hockey these days. Why is it boring? And for the first period, it was really boring last night. Like, they're down 2-0. There was nothing that's like, wow, that's awesome. I mean, Mitch Marner went flying through the air, but it's a low event game that they're playing now. And more than that, yeah, there's the drop pass and the zone entry issues on the power play, but also that, what Ian highlighted was they're also really relying on shots from the point, like low percentage shots from the point to get to the net. And if you take a look at the heat map, it is left point, right point, and not a lot of shots coming from the slot, which you would usually equate with the score zone, which is what it was last year. So something fundamentally in that planning has shifted. And, the question was, is it something where they're working with a defensive zone or a defensive-minded system or a low percentage system, with the mind that eventually they're going to free them and say, hey, Here's how you play responsibly defensively. Now, incorporate that with your natural instincts to go play and score lots of goals. But that doesn't really make a ton of sense. So the big, long-winded answer is I have no idea.
What would be the point of having this much talent up front, this much offensive talent up front, and playing low event hockey? Like, that doesn't make any sense. You're playing, like, you play low event hockey when you don't have skill. When you are compensating, when you're going, like what the Leafs were in 15-16 when Babcock took over, that team played low event hockey because that team needed to. If they played run and gun, like, they were a team of fourth liners, or not even that. And if you play run and gun on that style with that talent group, well, you're going to get torched every night. And that group looked good because they bought into we're going to have to play low event, and it's they were kind of a team you could sort of get behind.
16-17 was so fun because they tried to teach them to defend, and then at some point they were just like, all right, I guess you don't know how to do that, so go have fun.
Yeah.
And they just tried to win every game 5-4, and they won enough of them that they made the playoffs. It was awesome.
So what could possibly be the logic of not playing to that? What could possibly be the reason that you have $40 million wrapped up in 4 forwards, and you're not going to play high event hockey? I mean, come on. That just to me is that's a disconnect to me between what this team is and what someone wants them to be.
I think it's pretty clear. I think everybody's talked about the answer that actually naming it is that Zach Hyman's the Hart Trophy.
Well, man,
I think that's the answer that nobody's really brave enough to say right here.
And Steve's mentioned it before, Sean, but like, should a line be this affected by Zach Hyman not being there? Should a team be this affected because they don't have Hyman and Dermott? Really? Like, not to take away from what those guys bring, but really?
I mean, line makeup's kind of interesting. In the modern game, left wing, right wing, center. I mean, it might be one thing for our beer league team or the team that will hit the ice later this week. Whereas now it's sort of, different defined roles where you have somebody goes in and digs, somebody can go in and distribute, and somebody can go in and finish. And I think maybe like Hyman's the guy who can go in there and he's not going to necessarily dangle, but he will be a bulldog in the corner, dig it out, and then sort of send it down the assembly line. So, maybe that's it. Maybe it is.
I just can't help but feel, and I hate picking on the coach and going back to the coach, but it just feels like an I'm right fest. The Barry is not what I need, and Muzzin can't play on the right. Well, Barry plays on the right there, Mike. And Hyman's pretty good, huh? Remember that comment? Hyman's pretty good, huh? Yeah.
And also the usage of Jason Spezza and how this.
I want to talk about that.
How this could eventually really hamstring Kyle Dubas if, say, you want to get other low-cost UFAs in town, and if this poor guy gets waived and ends up playing in the AHL, and then you go down to another person who might come on a discount, and by the way, you might end up in the ECHL. But hey, come on.
Yeah, Patan's going to play center. How about I try that once, we lose, and I say fuck you forever? Which is basically what happened. It's basically what happened to that hockey player.
How long can they go this way? How long can this continue?
Aren't we done here?
Wait, I need to know what was that?
Well, I said when the Leafs were losing, and now they won 3 straight and then lost in the shootout. I said, guys,
do you credit them as full 3 wins for those?
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, Vegas and then 2
LA and was it Philly?
Mm-hmm. Do you get?
There were a couple sloppy ones.
Do you get half points in there for a close win over LA?
The way they were playing, I'm like, good.
Okay.
At least you
That's
won,
fair.
and then they played Vegas tight.
Just asking.
Yeah, no, I totally get where you're coming from, and believe me, my mentions have been full of it. But I look at the constant, I look at the trend, I look at Justin Hall and go, they didn't let him play hockey last year. You know what I mean? Like, there's a huge, from the outside looking in, disconnect between the coach and the GM, and at some point, I still stand by what I said a couple weeks ago. I think if it were 100% up to the GM, he'd be gone by now. He undercuts him at every turn. At every turn. Every move he makes is not good enough for him. And at what point is this just not a match?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's
Sean,
a match.
what do you think the makeup of that is?
The makeup of the relationship?
Makeup of the relationship and the makeup of Kyle Dubas's opinion. Like, do
the
you
power
think,
structure?
Yeah. Do you think that Kyle Dubas went to management this offseason, we don't know. Do you think Kyle Dubas went to upper management and said, I want to let this guy go? And they said, no, he's got to hang out one more year. Do you think that he's insanely patient? Because Kyle Dubas is a lot of things. He doesn't strike me as an insanely patient person based on the moves he made this summer.
I mean, anything I'd have would just be pure. I have no.
We're not.
That is so.
I just
far
want
above
your
my
opinion
pay
on
grade.
this one.
Yeah,
That's the lifeblood of this show.
Yeah.
Sean is.
Yeah, we're not reporters. We're just talking.
Sorry, can I
Guessing.
Yeah, can I
This
call
is
a
Steve
friend?
Dangle journalistic podcast. No,
The thing. I mean, what's always fascinated me. I'm not going to dance entirely around the question of Mike Babcock as a character study has always fascinated me, and more so over the last couple of years. And this one's going to seem like it starts in left field, and maybe it might end in left field. We'll see how this goes. I did a story, I think it was last year. I just showed up at the skate for the first time in a long time, stood in the back of the room and listened to Mike Babcock talk. I'd just come back from Saskatoon reporting for the book. And when I went to Saskatoon, what struck me was none of these people sound like Mike Babcock.
Okay.
Like I didn't go to the 7-Eleven and it's like, hey, can I get this pack of gum? Yep, that'll be 25 cents. Like nobody's like that.
Sound like normal people. Yeah.
Yeah, can I get my coffee? You want the large double? Okay. You got a high motor in there.
It's real good coffee.
Yeah, right? Real good coffee. Real good
Sound
energy.
like
Real good
Yogi
energy.
Bear.
Well, that's it,
Yeah,
right?
he loves coffee.
Right.
So I came back and I'm like,
Filters hard. Sorry.
This good man loves paywalls.
Sorry. Anyway.
so I came back and I'm standing there and I'm like, one, I have no idea what he's talking about because all I can think about is his accent. Like what accent?
Where
Yeah,
did
right?
it come from?
No, that's exactly it. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, this isn't from Saskatoon. Like, unless I went to the wrong Saskatoon. Like, did I book the wrong friggin' airline ticket? So what I did was, because I'm a professional journalist and I take things very seriously, I started calling linguists. I started calling linguists at the University of Toronto, University of Manitoba, University of Saskatchewan, I believe, and started asking them, like, okay, I'd send them audio files of Mike Babcock talking.
Oh my God! You sent
This is
linguists,
amazing.
doctors, people who are studying this.
Yeah.
Mike Babcock.
Mike
Okay,
Babcock
this is
talking,
great.
right? So, and here's the background on Mike Babcock, is that he grew up, some of his early formative years were in a place, because his dad was either in mining or geology, or maybe one of those two things, or both. Grew up in a place called Tungsten, which I think was in the Yukon, and it only existed because of, hey, guess what?
Tungsten.
Yeah,
Shocking.
good guess. You know this story.
Yeah.
And then they moved to a place in northern Manitoba that existed only by the grace of the government, again, for mining. So the people who lived in Tungsten, guess what? Weren't born and raised in Tungsten. They came from all over the place. And the people in northern Manitoba, again, from all over the place, the north, everywhere. And then finally settled in Regina when he was a teenager, and that's sort of where he sort of identifies as being from there. So if you think about it growing up, you'd have picked up accents, the way you talk. Like we have a Southern Ontario accent, which sounds like Southern Ontario to us, but it might sound something to somebody else. So he picked all of this up. And it's this weird sort of melange of like Letterkenny meets Yogi Bear meets all of this stuff, right? But that's part of it. So, the linguists identified, okay, these are some of the regional dialects. These are some of how the vowels sound. This is some of the nomenclature. This is some of the way the words sound. That's one part of it. The second part of it is, and this gets into Mike Babcock, is that, okay, so he grew up in Saskatoon, but then he went and he coached, went to McGill, so he lived in Montreal. Then he went out west and coached again. Then he went to London and coached in the UK. Then he moved to, LA.
By the way, his London flow, that hair.
Right?
Oh yeah.
The hair was great.
But then he lived in Southern California. And then he lived in Michigan. And those are, some of them especially have real strong regional dialects.
Sure, yeah.
I don't know if this happens to you guys. Like sometimes I'll be interviewing somebody on the phone from, say, the U.S. South. And I'll be talking to like a football coach in Alabama or, a hockey coach somewhere in Tennessee for a story. And just through the course of a long conversation, I might start twanging some accents. Just because that's what I'm hearing, coming back at me over the phone. And, nobody's called me on it yet. They're like, are you making fun of me? I'm like, no, it's just subconscious. Like, I'm not going to drop a y'all, but like, you start reflecting, maybe you flatten out some of your A's or your accents. Because it's just, you're listening, you're empathetic, you just can't help it.
Right.
It happens a
It's
lot.
like, if you live in England, you're going to start to sound British after a while.
Yes, exactly. But Mike Babcock went to England, went to Michigan, went to LA. Guess what? he sounds exactly like friggin' Mike Babcock would have been about 30 years ago, right? So, talking to the linguists, like, how does this happen? Like, people develop accents usually where they move. And they said, well, what that usually indicates is that somebody has a very strong, unshakable sense of self and self-confidence and awareness of who they are and feel absolutely no need to not conform with wherever it is they are, because this is who they are. This is who they've always been.
Wow.
Sean, you ever go to the TFC game and have an Italian sausage there?
What the hell was that about?
It was freaking believable.
Funny, but
Unfriggin' believable.
Unfriggin' believable.
But
Because that's what he does, though. He brings you in, and then he goes, all right, let's talk hockey.
Yeah.
And that to me is Mike Babcock.
Yeah.
From his accent. And I'm sorry, that's a Shaggy Dog story, but like
Damn, I
that, to
love
me,
that.
that to me is Mike Babcock. That this is who he is. This is what's got him here. He is, by the way, one of the most successful ever to do his job anywhere in the NHL. And he is who he is. He is who he was, and he is who he always will be. And good luck.
Okay. Interesting. So with that, Jesse, I'm going to ask you have the TV remote? Because what I know, according to Ken Campbell, is that from what he was told, Ron MacLean is going to address last night's comments at the top of Hometown Hockey, which for us right now will start in about 5 minutes. So we're going to try to get it up, and if we do, we'll pause, we'll watch, and then we'll react.
Address what happened last night on Hockey Night in Canada. Don Cherry made remarks which were hurtful, discriminatory, which were flat out wrong. We at Sportsnet have apologized. It certainly doesn't stand for what Sportsnet or Rogers represents. We know diversity is the strength of the country. We see it in the travels with our show and with Hockey Night in Canada. So I owe you an apology too. That's the big thing that I want to emphasize. I sat there, did not catch it, did not respond. Catherine Tenise, Tsuut'ina First Nation, once said, in any wrongdoing, the real key is recognition and acknowledgement. And I wanted to let you know that first, and then you work on the relationship so that it isn't divisive, so that something can be a unifying event. Idle No More was a great lesson to all of us. Last night was a really great lesson to Don and me. We were wrong, and I sincerely apologize, and I wanted to thank you for calling me and Don on that last night.
Okay. So, I don't know, by this point, you've seen you may have seen the apology. Essentially, if you didn't, it basically went like this, and I will paraphrase this because I'm not going to try to attempt to say what Ron MacLean said word for word. You can look it up online. It's available.
Do you want me to insert?
That'd be great. Can you do that?
So people have heard it.
Bingo.
On the podcast.
So here's the deal. He owned it. He acknowledged. He owned. Ron, yes. Acknowledged, owned, and said, we got to, and reference, and I think this is important, reference that some people have been hurt and relationships need to be mended and rebuilt, and frankly, new ones need to be forged, based on what our conversation earlier in the show. However, I have to say, personally, that I think it's awful toothless and awful gutless that Don Cherry was not there.
Ron had to jump on the grenade.
So why does Ron MacLean, who played a pretty minor role in this, and he said I didn't catch it, and that's sort of what I thought might have been happening. Now you could say it was wrong anyway, and it was, but for me personally, and these are just my thoughts, they're in Welland tonight. Welland ain't far. Don lives in Mississauga.
Yeah.
Why isn't he there?
Because Ron is eloquent and can talk.
I assume there's a lot more going on behind the scenes that prevent him from being there.
Even so,
whether it be his job on the line or him being bullish about it.
That's
the part that worries me.
Yeah.
That he doesn't want to apologize.
Exactly.
Yes, and I don't think he does.
Exactly.
Because he's got Twitter.
There's a reason we haven't heard from him.
Yeah. Well, and A, Don should apologize. B, is there anywhere he should be less than in front of a camera at this moment?
Especially, they couldn't put him on live there. I wouldn't trust him at this point.
Dear God.
Yeah.
I'm going to get in shit.
Why?
I don't know. It's good on Ron.
Sean, what do you think? What did you catch from that?
I'm just going to sit here and watch Steve trying to swallow his tongue here.
Yeah, right.
Until I
don't
choke.
think-
It's actually
Listen.
it's actually bleeding. You can see it coming out of his
The
mouth.
only way
He's
you
just
get in
biting down
trouble
so hard.
is if there's conjecture about something being untrue. I think we're asking you your opinion.
Oh, if I can borrow a line from Letterkenny, fucking embarrassing.
Okay, Sean.
That is a line from Letterkenny.
What do you? I mean, listen. I know you're working on a story for this, and I want you to blow the whole thing.
No. I think it's interesting that Don wasn't part of it. I do. I think Steve.
Did you think he was going to be a part of it?
Okay, so the thing about it being in Welland is there's technology that you could do a double ender, and that's where you're both on the screen. So Ron could have been like Brady Bunch, with Don over his shoulder saying yes, 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 or no, no, no. They could have done a double ender, but I suspect that Jesse was right too, that having Don on live television the day after that would be like playing with fire while also maybe covering yourself with aviation fuel.
And
there's some inherent risk involved, and the stakes, I think, would be so high for Sportsnet and Rogers right now with corporate sponsors whose names are attached. Like, this isn't the Scotiabank. No, this is Rogers Hometown Hockey.
Yeah.
But Scotiabank is like a presenting sponsor. Budweiser is the presenting sponsor.
Yeah,
for
the clip of Don that went on to Twitter
Yeah.
had Budweiser right in the middle of
right?
it. They
Like,
can't be happy
there's
about
some
that.
heavy hitters as part of this. Like there's a lot on the lines that if this was live, like you're on the high wire above Niagara Falls. Like that's what Ron just had to walk there. And if you had Don Cherry jumping up and down on that high wire, like who knows what could have happened. So I mean, yeah. I with all of that being said, if Don was out there and was contrite and did say this isn't what I meant, or I'm sorry, or
I
I've learned a
misspoke.
lot over the last 24 hours, or whatever, contrition would have been important. It would have been key. The fact that he wasn't there now, I think, lets this all live for at least another 6 days, because everybody's going to be wondering what happens Saturday. So if Don's there, does he address it? Does he not address it? Does Don not make it to Saturday? Does something happen in between? Does Rogers issue a press release to say, we've evaluated, we've talked to people, and we've decided to make this move, ...
His Twitter account. He has one, and it's filtered. You can prim and proper it up as much as you like. It's filtered.
It's not the
by a
same as
woman
being on
who,
TV.
by the way, has such tenure in the industry that the fact that she has to do that is so beneath her. What were you going to say, Jesse?
I was just going to say, as someone who enjoys watching Toronto sports media, I'm very interested to see how it plays out tomorrow on the outlet TSN and Sportsnet, on just how much they're allowed to talk about it over their airwaves and what their bosses are going to say that they're allowed
I'll
to
be honest.
and they
Not
can't
a
say.
single person has tweeted about it. Not a single sports
Personality
have I
from
have
Sportsnet?
not seen a single one.
That's
And-
what I'm interested to see.
and
Like,
I-
have they been told by upper management, hey, this is
right.
the mandate?
And I
Scott
get
MacArthur
that.
tweeted about it, and he's got a relatively big role, right? He's on the fan morning show.
Michael
and
Grange,
Grange.
Michael Grange has tweeted that he's wearing a poppy on air as a symbol for all caps all Canadians. All of so he has tweeted about it. He's retweeted. There have been yes.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't know if you can.
But this is the biggest story in hockey right now. Is it going to lead every sports show on the network tomorrow?
No.
Well, if Mitch Marner comes out tonight and he has a torn Achilles, then
Yeah.
Then that's the biggest story.
Mike
But-
Babcock, by the way, did
I'm sorry,
talk
Steve.
about that. Apparently
I know
Mitch Marner's
it's been I know it's been a big day for you already.
stiff?
I'm very
Is that
He says he's stiff. He says he's real stiff. Real stiff.
That's-
So
that's good news?
I hope so. Maybe a high ankle sprain or something. But that's not great news if it is a high ankle
The
sprain. But it's
facts-
still not a ripped up, torn up ankle or something.
I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but like the fact he got back on the ice at all suggests
Twice.
that it's not something. Yeah, twice. Suggests and looked like he wanted to finish the game. Suggests it's not catastrophic. Like he shouldn't have finished that game, and he shouldn't be playing tonight. So all that's above board.
Right. Back to what we were saying is that I think. So you're embarrassed.
Yeah, it's mortifying, man. Like.
Tell us how you feel. And you're not. Listen, I don't want you to be afraid because I don't think you're going to say anything that's going to be like, well.
No, I know. I'm trying to figure out. Sportsnet's not the victim here, right?
No.
So I'm trying to talk about it in a way that properly articulates my feelings, without trying to make this about Sportsnet. You know what I mean? They're not the victims here. But I get to see the statement come out from the company, and it's one giant company. They can only make one statement. But I get to see, all these people that I work with like on a daily basis go, fuck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like go,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
because it's not representative of the other employees. That's for sure.
Like if you manage the social accounts, just resign to the fact that it's going to be a shitty week for you. If you do anything online, just resign to the fact that it's going to be a shitty week for you. And like anyone who's working on hockey night, like your whole week's efforts are going towards this upcoming Saturday and somehow redeeming yourselves, and knowing that it all hinges on a guy who won't even get on camera and apologize for it all. And how do you win? How do you win, right? Like if you're
an employee or if you're Sportsnet the brand.
If you're an employee.
You don't. The employees, unfortunately, whatever the employees believe, and I can tell you from the limited time I worked there, they are a inclusive, kind, good group of people. I loved it there. It was so much fun.
There's one guy who can make this close to better, and he hasn't shown up.
Yeah. And
That's what it is.
The worst part about it, and again, Jesse, I think you made a really good point. It seems like it's either they don't trust him to say it properly, or he doesn't want to apologize.
They're both unacceptable answers.
Right. But what's unfortunate is these guys the guys that are not Don Cherry, that Don Cherry is probably not thinking about when he makes those comments, is all the people that are there every single day working their butts off, who are younger and trying to carve out a career in sports in an industry that's in contraction right now. And here he is making it a lot tougher on them too. We've obviously not the victim here, but there's shrapnel, and it's a shame. So anyway, I mean, listen, like I said, I always will respect somebody that comes out and owns it. And I'm not surprised by anything that Ron MacLean said tonight. No. He's obviously, if you met Ron MacLean and you talked to him for 5 minutes, you'd know that this guy is racked with guilt and feels awful. And
sounded sorry, looked sorry, was in front of a camera.
Yep.
And on microphone.
And not making excuses. He told you what happened and said, I'm gonna be better. And that I respect. But boy, and I'm sure management knows that this is probably the lesser of evils, but it's still not a great look right now. And it's a shame. It's a real shame because it brings down everybody else who works their butts off and everybody else who feels, like you said so eloquently, Sean, othered. That is such a really...
That's at the forefront.
Yeah, that is the most important part. So anyway, I don't think there's much more to say on that, but we'll move forward here. So let's...
You having fun first show?
Yeah, sorry, Sean. It's a heavy show for you to be on. But I'm glad you were here. I really am. I'm glad you were here because you put words in such a way. You're such a great storyteller, and you say things in a way that we could just never approach. And I'm so glad you were here because your understanding of it is so much deeper than any of us could have really offered. I mean that.
Do you guys ever talk about light subjects though?
Oh yeah,
because if you want to have me back for one of those,
yeah. You ever heard about Steve's kayak?
I'd love to hang out maybe one day and talk about fun things.
Yeah. Well, you know what?
Nick Robertson stole my kayak.
We'll do
eating our livers.
We'll do a quick press conference here and then we'll wrap it up. Unfortunately, heavier show, but that's just what happened. Shout out to the Sens for scoring 2 goals in 4 seconds. That was cool.
Nice.
Shout out to the Flames that look like the Leafs West or the Leafs look like the Flames East. Both high-powered offenses who just cannot get it together. Although the Flames seem to be turning it around just a little bit faster than the Leafs are. They played the Blues last night, lost in overtime. I don't know. I think they might be back on track. And Robbie Fabry, man.
Oh my God!
What a crazy! He gets traded
from
the Stanley Cup champions.
How do you make that trade, knowing A, you're giving away a former first-round pick, and B, the guy on the other end of the phone is Steve Yzerman? Are you nuts? Are you nuts making that trade? Hilarious that it already looks bad.
Yeah.
Hilarious and totally predictable.
If Steve Yzerman calls you,
hang up the phone. Hang up the phone. First of all, you know what he did with Tampa Bay. Second of all, he's on Detroit, so you know he has nothing to give you. He has nothing of value to give you.
He wasn't De La Rose a Montreal Canadiens player for a bit, and then was sort of like a
Yes!
cast off.
He's a good GM with a bad team. Hang up the phone. What are you doing? That's
go.
usually more like what the show's like.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. No, I get it now. Okay.
We haven't even talked about the Oilers yet, which is weird.
I know. What do we want to talk about with the Oilers?
Oh, we don't. It's just we usually find a way.
They always creep into the show. I don't think there's anything. Ron McLean, by the way, has also tweeted out his apologies as well, so you can check those out.
On his Twitter that he has and can use.
Yes. Let's do the press conference.
This is good timing. Someone on our Reddit said, "Any good book ideas?" Sean, could you recommend a book?
Hey, is it out in audiobook?
I don't know. This is my first one. I don't know how any of this stuff works. I wrote it and then I hit send and then it's like
that was it.
It's on the shelves and stuff.
Okay.
All show long, I've been like, does Sean have an audiobook where he is reading the book?
Nobody
Because
wants to hear this voice for anything long.
Why not?
They
You got a good
do.
voice.
No.
We want to hear you sing it, Sean.
Well, I mean,
Wait till you see how many listens and views the show gets. You might change your mind then, Sean.
it's before the lights go out, McClellan and Stewart, division of Penguin Random House, available in fine bookstores near you. I drew all of the pictures myself.
Whoa.
So all of the pictures were drawn by myself.
What?
Wow.
Yeah,
By his own hand.
by my own hand. There are no pictures in the book.
Jesse, what else we got?
We got an interesting question after our earlier discussion. Someone was wondering after the Giroux slap shot.
Oh.
They were saying if Chara took a slapper, hit the goalie in the mask, someone got injured, would the NHL scrap the shootout? What do you guys think?
If there was a shootout injury,
Yeah. Like Chara takes a clapper, injures the goalie. Think they would scrap the shootout.
If it was
That's from
Boston
Scott-
against Montreal.
Yeah.
You'd have Chara do it at one end and then like Shea Weber. Like, could you imagine being Tuukka Rask and Shea Weber comes on the you're like, you might make a call to your agent saying like, tell my wife I love her. Like that
my
you know
God.
it's coming. That's a really interesting question.
I had an idea in the LFR today because this is now the second straight game where the Leafs have played Philly. It's gone to overtime, and Philly took a penalty in the final 10 seconds of overtime. Now, it didn't matter in the first one because the Leafs took a penalty as well. But in this one, I've seen it suggested, well, then they should be penalized and you take away their first shooter. I think that's a bit extreme. Here's what I think should happen. Overtime continues. Overtime continues for the duration of the power play. If they score, overtime's obviously over. If they don't score, play continues until there's a whistle, then it's the shootout.
Why can't you go to 10 minutes of 3-on-3 rather than 5? Because
I think
there's
you can-
absolutely a way. And then because you think of the time that you know, there's no scrape anymore, they bring out the shovels. But like if you're worried about your time window on TV, like that 5 minutes, the shootout's got to be 5 minutes, maybe just a hair.
How about an
well,
11
but it
round
goes 11
shootout?
rounds, right? But
So why don't you
know
go 10 minutes 3-on-3? Somebody's going to score.
I gotta tell you, I think that everybody thinks and looks at that with rose-colored glasses, and I respect and appreciate that. But I think the second you make that period longer, they're going to start playing defensively. They're going to start playing like Babcock's going to be out there line matching and starting guys that don't need to be, and they are. 100%.
I don't think you can. It's 3-on-3. There's too much space.
Tell someone in the 80s about the neutral zone trap, and they'd be like, you can't do it. Tell someone when it was 15 goals a game. I'm telling you, I feel like the time limit matters. I really do.
How about this? No offsides in overtime.
Oh,
Yes.
Love
How about
that.
that?
Yes.
Now
Oh
we're
my.
talking.
It's
You go-
already barely hockey.
All right.
Holy.
Take
Yeah.
away the offsides.
Straight up pond hockey.
Straight 3-on-3, no offsides, 10 minutes.
You're basically
I'll
playing
give you-
NHL at that
I'll meet you in the
point.
middle.
Oh, it's great.
I'll meet you in the
threes
middle.
and take out penalties. There's no penalties.
Ah.
Either. Mascots. How about two bucks? Like big heads. You're allowed to have all of it. All of it. Just make it all legal.
Carlton grabs a stick.
The commissioner should be Sean Ramjack with EA Sports.
No, I
Carlton v. Gritty, who wins last night?
Oh, man.
Oh, gritty, but Carlton would shut it down. And then it gets to overtime. It's a finesse game. Carlton wins. Carlton wins. You see him do a backflip?
I'd watch that overtime. I think we just solved it right here. That
There you
Jesse's idea and
Yeah.
that's
7 minutes.
7 minutes mascot hockey.
Yeah. Boom. Boom.
Boom.
Yeah,
No
there you go.
offsides.
Any more?
What did you guys make of Bettman's comments about the Olympics?
Oh.
In
He
20...
said, to be fair, he said, okay, so what he said was they are tremendously disruptive to the NHL schedule, which for those keeping track did not bother him when there was a lockout and a strike.
How far you want to go
And
down
another
this
strike.
rabbit hole there, Gary? The All-Star Game's pretty disruptive. You want to go there?
Sean,
How about sending teams to frickin' Sweden like in November? Is that not disruptive?
Sean, you've written a book on outreach in hockey.
Yes.
Do you think the NHL needs to be at
Yes.
the Olympics to grow the game?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you think
Yes.
that, and this is
Yes.
why I asked, do you really think that Gary Bettman and the leadership group there are equipped?
Lawyers.
Are they equipped enough to grow this game now? He's been the head for 25 years unchallenged. At a certain point, though, and they say on average most executives lose their effectiveness at about year 5. So that's why you see. No, I'm not kidding. There's studies done on this.
No, I'm laughing.
And he's
'cause
at
it's a
year
hilarious
25,
number.
right? Is there a point at which Gary's just doing this for Gary's ego and being difficult because he can over a little bit of money that doesn't matter, that's inconsequential to the NHL?
I was just down in South Bend, Indiana, with the family watching the University of Notre Dame beat Virginia Tech in football, and we stayed at a hotel in South Bend.
Did you meet Rudy?
No,
Ah.
no, I didn't. But we did watch the movie as a family the other night,
Such a
as
great
we watch
movie.
it every night. And the NHL existed solely on the scroll at the bottom of ESPN. There was not an NHL highlight anywhere.
Wow.
And there's like 15 ESPN channels. There's the shouting channel, there's the yelling channel, there's the yelling and shouting channel, and then they have college, and then they have the sports center.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they have the yelling sports center.
Right.
And then the yelling college.
Yes, the yelling college
And Keith
at the yelling
Olbermann
sports
somehow is on all of them.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Back for his 5th go-round. Keith Olbermann again. Anyway, sorry.
And there's no hockey. But, there are signs that hockey is growing in certain parts of the United States. University of Illinois, I think, is icing its first collegiate team. Because, again, Chicago Blackhawks, the echo boom of their dynasty. Dallas has certain growth. Some of these teams, especially in the
Southern
Sun Belt,
California.
have invested heavily in arenas themselves, and that's sort of caught on. I mean, Nick Robertson is kind of an echo product of that. So there are targets that he can point to for growth. It's not growing in Canada. And more than that, it's stagnant as the population continues to grow in Canada. Now, I only have a Bachelor of Applied Arts from Ryerson, and my accounting isn't too good. But if the population of the country continues to go up and the growth stays like this, eventually you're going to lose more and more Canadians. That's an issue. And that is not something I don't think Gary Bettman is beholden to, because he's beholden to the owners, the vast majority of whom are based in the United States. So yeah, from a grassroots level, hockey needs to be at the Olympics because, I mean, we all know what the highest watched Canadian sports telecast of all time was. It was 2010. And something like 16.5 million Canadians tuned in to watch Sidney Crosby score in Vancouver.
And that number's probably low.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? So
that might be a
16.5.
conservative estimate.
So that's like half plus the population. And Steve was on the ground there. That was the night you almost got arrested, I think.
One of them, yes.
Yes, one of them. So yeah, I mean, so 2022 is in China. The time zone's an issue. Who knows when it comes back through here again on a winter schedule. And that is a problem. Like the NHL, they can't make money off the Olympics. And not only that, you're loaning your labor away for free on the hope that it does foster growth in these different markets, right? Like, you're loaning away Connor McDavid, and he could come back with a torn ACL.
John Tavares,
and you
2014.
what do you get back? You get nothing. You lose one of your most dynamic players. And also, if that player is supposed to go deep in the playoffs, they're going to be exhausted because they've just spent 3 weeks of the most intense hockey that they've probably ever played. Right. The best hockey, the hockey everybody in the world wants to watch. But it doesn't do anything for your product. So as a fan, as a Canadian, I would love to see it at the Olympics. Grudgingly, I also see the NHL side.
Wow.
Grudgingly.
Wow.
I want to underscore, bold, italicize, quotation marks, grudgingly.
But in the long term, is the NHL side going to win them new markets and more money? Because I feel like the NHL's view is short-sighted. Yeah, it makes sense for now. You grudgingly see their side and whatever. Okay, fine. But sometimes you got to have lost leaders. There's a reason that they price milk and bread lower than the market value or about the market value, and that's just to get you in the grocery store. Sometimes you got to do the things to get you in the grocery store.
How
And
do you
it's
know
not
this shit?
and it's not games in I don't know. It's not a game in Sweden. It's a tournament that means something. It's not the World Cup with some of Europe and young guys. It's It's an actual World Cup.
Yeah, because that's
with
not
actual
on
teams.
prime time in NBC and across the world.
Yeah.
Your World Cup tournament is not being
I'm not being a
aired
contrarian
there.
here, but you still see more Team North America jerseys than almost anything
One,
else. Right?
It's
I
true.
agree. I 100%
Not to
agree.
be a contrarian.
It's true.
'Cause they were
One,
the only
those are pretty
exciting team.
awesome jerseys, and two, that was a pretty awesome team.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
And they made it all the way to the gold medal. Oh, wait, that was the one team no one gave a shit about.
Oh, yeah, Team Some of Europe versus
Yeah.
Canada.
Team
Great.
Some of Europe. There were no.
Some of Europe is beautiful at this time. of year.
Absolutely.
I hear Slovenia looks great.
Dude,
I'm
there
not
was
actually
one.
kidding.
There was like one Some of Europe jersey, and it was the one guy who kept wearing a Slovakia jersey in the stands. Like
Yeah.
some Swedes came, Finns came, the North American team really brought attention to the tournament. No one gave a shit about the Some of Europe team.
No.
But,
And it was a boring championship game. It's like Marian Gabrick and Anze
No, the
Carpetar and
championship
his
game
merry
was
men.
good. It was just that it was 2 games. In the first game, it went
Right,
to
it was
overtime,
late.
right?
Yes, it was 2 games.
But they won it it was overtime, correct? Or it was third period goal. which I
No,
hated.
Marchand scored. I want to say shorthanded in like the final minute.
Yeah, the final minute. Yeah,
I'm
it came down
confident
to
in
the
saying
end.
you're the only person within 6 postal codes of where we're sitting who would remember that.
You're probably right.
But I mean, like hockey faces more structural issues in terms of growth, and a lot of it is what we've talked about. It's a very exclusive sport. That's the bigger challenge. If you want to talk about growth of the game, the NHL has to find a way to make it more accessible. And how do you make a game accessible when you need a multi-million-dollar building with a frozen sheet of water on the floor? Like, that's not
Tough.
going to happen everywhere. That
Sounds
expensive.
ridiculous when you phrase it that way.
Right?
Yeah, it's
that's their challenge. And the thing that the NHL, like the ghost of Christmas future here for the NHL is, like Canada's always fueled whatever it is they are in the US. Like it's been on the money spent here in Canada. What happens if that starts to go away? Then what do you do?
Well, and there's, what is it,
Like you're
70%, 80% of the players are from here?
Like you're talking 7 years from now, I think the Sportsnet mega deal's done, more or less. I think we're almost
still
about halfway.
7 years to go.
It's something like that. Yeah,
Whoa.
it's like 7 years away. They're not even. They might be halfway at the end of the season.
I think that's what it is. Yeah.
So, like, are they going to get $5.2 billion again, knowing the media landscape as we know? Well, maybe not. Who knows, right? But what if they don't? So
But what if they only got $5.2
But- and it's
billion
not-
12 years after getting $5.2
and it's
billion?
not just hockey. Like there have been stories for years about the rights bubble bursting for all sports.
Yeah.
like that's coming. So what happens if that happens? And then what we're talking about with stagnant participation rates, registration rates in Canada, also sort of coming in and online at the same time. What if those two combine to really hit the NHL where it hurts? Because if you lose the avidity here in Canada, what do you got? What do you got? Like 7.7 million Canadians watch the Toronto Raptors win the NBA championship. That's a lot of Canadians.
There will be aftershock of that. 20
this-
years from now, we're going to see all the kids come up
Oh,
who watched it, or 15 years from now who watched it, who were like, I was a Kawhi, Kyle Lowry,
Right?
Serge Ibaka,
So here's something that somebody asked me, or mentioned it to me. We were at the parade, and I'm pretty sure we were both sober. But I'm not sure. It wasn't the parade, sorry. It was the night of. So I took the long walk back to get, so everybody was, after the game, after that, it took 30 minutes to figure out if the Raptors won at the end because of all the fouls and the calls and the reviews. Everybody's walking back, and they're like, so the parade tomorrow could be like, your next week could be 2 or 3 million people. I mean, yeah, that sounds right. So say the Leafs win in 5 years. They win the cup in 5 years. I'm sorry about this. Say, would it be as big? Would the parade be as big?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I've been saying
Because
it'll
the
be.
Jurassic Park is more representative of where we live than
and what we're going to be.
Maple Leaf Square.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've said that I think the parade will be as many people, but it'll just last longer. Like you'll just see someone set up a tent at like friggin' Front and John, just because I don't know. I never thought this moment would ever happen.
It's an interesting
Based on
discussion.
all evidence, I don't think it actually will be bigger.
I mean, we'll
don't
never know, right?
Yeah.
Shut up! Yes, we will. We will know, and it'll seem like there will be more people because I'll be running around in circles, running around with a big sign that says "Sean was wrong." How dare you? No, you're right. You're right, man.
Like
Sure.
it's
Also, we literally can't fit more people than we did.
well, there's
So-
that too. Hopefully, the best practices will have carried over. But the whole concept of before the lights go out, like 15 years ago, would that have been possible? No, I would have been laughed out of every rink. Because of course, hockey's the biggest thing. But I've been really lucky. One, I've I've had the chance to talk about the project in a lot of different places, but I'm able to talk about the project in a lot of different places. Like, it's a book about Canada's frayed tether with hockey. Like when we were kids, think about
Wouldn't
that
even have been a
discussion.
consideration.
I feel like you could change a few words and it could easily be a book about the Walkman. You know what I mean? It's cumbersome, but you know what? It's the number one thing. And remember your old shitty cassette player, and all of a sudden it's not a thing anymore.
You know what the NHL feels like to me? And I've had a lot of experience with this in, being in radio for 12 years and seeing it change. I got into radio right before the crash in 2008. So I was on the air at the end of 2007, when I was 19, and saw this industry change. And I saw the way that my friends were listening to music, and I knew the way I was listening to music, and how that was changing, and how the record companies were like, nah, it's not going to happen. Now you always need us. And they got media got slaughtered. Media was traditionally recession-proof as a business. Media got slaughtered. And the record companies, which is less publicized, also did too. Because
it was a super good time to be halfway through media school.
Right. And I feel like the NHL feels to me the way record companies and Metallica reacted to Napster. It's like they're so unaware of this undercurrent. Now they could be aware of it, but they're so unaware of what to do about it. And instead of going, okay, here's a plan where we can incorporate this, they're going to fight it every step of the way. That's how this feels to me.
Here's an interesting to me in my twisted brain. So we're sitting here, it's 2019, 15 years from now. I'm not going to do the math on what that year is. Sure. 15 years from now, what does the landscape look like here? So you have hockey, which is becoming increasingly niche. The grassroots, the pyramid here in Canada, which is the breadbasket, is shrinking. Like there's no denying or debating that. And then you have football, which is by far the biggest sport in North America. But at the grassroots level, it's crumbling. Like it's wasting away. There was a story in the Times last fall about New Jersey, high school football in New Jersey, which is not quite Texas, but was big. Those powerhouses can't field full teams anymore because parents aren't letting their kids play football.
Wow.
Why? Because of the increasing links between brain-wasting diseases, conditions, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and football. So, there is a great piece that Grantland did a couple of years ago about what would the death of football look like. And this was one of the first waves of parents aren't going to let their kids play. Then there's going to be legal issues that, Pop Warner coaches and officials are going to get sued because 12-year-olds are showing signs of CTE because you can, in a couple of years be diagnosed with it while you're still living because the tests right now have to be done post-mortem. So in 15 years, what might the sporting landscape be here? Like what might be, the dominant sporting story in Canada be? Are we going to be sitting here talking about the Leafs, or will this podcast transform into a Raptors TFC?
Yeah, what the hell are we going to do?
Will we all be sitting, you guys all be sitting around here talking for 2 hours about, the Call of Duty showcase down at Massey Hall because they're packing in and they're charging $200 a head to go and watch.
Yeah,
I'm going to be watching the Stanley Cup final between the Toronto How-To Hockeys and the Columbus Nashers.
Right? Yeah. Like we are in a moment here, I think, where a lot of the dominant sports leagues are, without maybe acknowledging it as much as they should or being aggressive as they should, at the risk of really, really losing a precipitous amount of their market share if they don't address structural issues. The NFL is much different, and I would argue much more troubling than the NHL, though the NHL does have CTE concerns. But it's...
NFL is inherent. It's like it's almost like you play.
You need to change the fundamental way of the game.
Maybe it'll be flag football.
Yeah.
But and again, I don't say that dismissively. I mean, maybe it'll just be flag football, and that can be fun to watch too. But like hockey has its own structural issues at its most fundamental levels that have to be addressed, or it will become a niche sport. That is my position.
Well, Sean,
Damn.
That was a really fun show.
Yeah, Sean, I want you to know that when you come back,
is there anything else depressing that I can
yeah,
talk
no,
about?
really,
I don't want to be sitting here.
It got dark at 4:30 today. That's pretty depressing.
I don't want to be sitting somewhere 20 years from now, turning on the TV and someone saying, 20 years ago, Sean Fitzgerald wrote a book about this, and now we're sitting here and, we should have listened to him. You know? I don't
Or
want
at
it
least
to be
bought a
that.
copy of his book, for God's sake.
Seriously, buy a copy of the book. I'm
They can be
sitting
kindling.
here.
Buy 10. Keep yourself warm this winter.
I'm sitting here and listening to you talk and just going, I'm legitimately listening to an expert.
Not at all.
Yes, I 100% am.
No.
Like, and I'm not even necessarily like talking about like hockey. You know, maybe you can take over for certain segments on certain channels. I'm talking about you're an expert through your research on what hockey is becoming in this country.
It's just because, I mean, it comes from, like, it's not an indictment. It's just like, Steve, I love you, man, but your life's really going off the rails. You've got to pull yourself together. You're going to be in trouble. Like, that's what it is for hockey.
Concerned friend.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, we're going
Concerned love.
We're in the hockey bubble right now with our kids, and it's great. And the problem is that a lot of people can't get in the bubble with us because of all of the barriers. That's a really badly mixed metaphor. But, it's such a great thing, and there's so many issues that aren't being addressed as aggressively as they should be. Right. Like, hockey isn't for everyone. As much as we like to say it isn't. And you can't blame any one person or any one group. Minor Hockey Association executives or volunteers who are trying their very best. But, some of their expertise, like, they're not marketing experts. They're not outreach experts. Maybe they don't have ties to communities. Like, they need help. And we have to find a way, as Canadians invested in hockey, to try and find solutions.
Wow. Well, listen, pick up the book one more time before the lights go out by Sean Fitzgerald. A season inside, a game on the brink. Sean, the next time you pop by, assuming there's no other dark cloud hanging over the show, we can't wait to have a little bit more fun with you because, man, Friday Night Shinny was a blast. And I was like, great, this show's going to be awesome. And you said it got dark at 4:30 today. I think it got dark at about 8 o'clock last night on Hockey Night in Canada, and it's hung over the rest of the day. So we apologize for the severity of the show, but I am glad that you were here because you spoke so well on it. So thank you so much for coming in, man, making time for us.
Thanks for having me.
The Steve Dangle Podcast. Follow the guys on Twitter at Steve_Dangle, at Adam WYLDE, and at Jesse Blake. Brought to you by Panago Pizza. Order at panago.com and stuff your face with deliciousness. Connection complete.